Chapter 647. There were many things happening in the capital these days. There were always some unimaginable things happening under the feet of the emperor. The disappearance of the Count of Chang and Li Yi had not completely passed. The death of the son of the assistant minister of works was like throwing a boulder into a calm lake, once again setting off monstrous waves. There was a lot of discussion among the people. This was not the first time something like this had happened. It had not been long since the son of the assistant minister of rights had been poisoned to death. Now, an even more famous playboy with a higher status in the capital had disappeared from the public sight forever. This made the ordinary people feel very unsafe. This was the capital. Even the lives of the family members of powerful officials could not be guaranteed. Wouldn't it be even more dangerous for ordinary people like them? When he went out to buy groceries, he had to worry about being hacked to death. When he went to a restaurant to eat, he had to wonder if the food would be poisoned. When he went to a brothel to have fun, he had to worry that the prostitute would stab him when he was at his most carefree. The people lost their sense of security and naturally became resentful. There were many more complaints and worries in the streets and alleys, as well as in the brothels. The following matters were left to the imperial censors, who were in disguise and hiding in every corner. In less than half a day, the imperial censors piled up on the emperor's desk like snowflakes. In the court, all the officials were silent. Emperor Jing sat on the dragon throne and said nothing. The atmosphere was extremely oppressive. An imperial censor walked out and said, "Your Majesty, those criminals are so crazy. This case has already had a great impact in the capital. If it is not eliminated in time, I'm afraid there will be unrest among the people. Yes, if this case is not strictly investigated, I'm afraid they will be even more presumptuous in the future. What face does the government have under the emperor's feet?" Everyone knew that the emperor was not in a good mood recently. At this time, only a few imperial censors dared to speak. "Louis, have you found out who did this case?" After some time, Emperor Jing's voice came slowly. Louis, dressed in official robes, stood out from the crowd. He bowed and said, "Your Majesty, this case has just been handed over to the Ministry of Justice. I have already sent people to investigate." "Investigate?" A voice came from behind Louis. Assistant Minister Li of the Ministry of Works walked out and said, "The criminal who killed my son is clearly related to those two women, but Assistant Minister Liu turns a blind eye to them." Is this the strict investigation that Assistant Minister Liu spoke of? The Assistant Minister of Works had just lost his son. It could be said that he was in an extremely tragic state. The moment he spoke, Louis immediately became the center of attention in the whole. "What two women? What's going on?" Emperor Jing frowned and asked. "Your Majesty, my son had a conflict with two women last night and didn't return for the entire night. He died this morning." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Work said in a sorrowful voice. Assistant Minister Liu clearly knows that those two women are the key to this case, yet he ignores them. "I cannot help but suspect." After a moment of silence in the hall, there was an uproar. They had all heard of Louis's name. He was an expert in solving cases and could be said to be a genius in investigating and interrogating cases. He was highly regarded by His Majesty. In just over a year, he was promoted from a small constable to the position of Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice. Everything he had today was given to him by His Majesty, and His Majesty could take these things back at any time. If Louis protected someone he shouldn't have in such a serious case, not only His Majesty, but many of the court officials present would not let him go. After all, the son of Assistant Minister Li of the Ministry of Works was dead. Who could guarantee that the next person to die would not be someone from their family? There's such a thing. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice protected the suspect who killed the son of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Works. This Louis is too bold. This case is of great importance. Is it something that an Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice can meddle in? The Minister of Justice looked at Lu Yi with an anxious expression and said, "What exactly happened? Why haven't you reported it to His Majesty?" The court was in an uproar because of the words of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Works. At this moment, another figure stood up and said, "May I ask Assistant Minister Li why your son brought more than 10 assassins to kill 2 weak women last night?" As soon as this was said, the uproar in the court lessened slightly. The expression of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Works changed slightly. More than 10 people were beheaded, and his son had died. This was the most important thing in this case. As for the other things, they were not so important. No one bothered to investigate the matter of the 2 women. Compared to his son, the 2 women were insignificant. They had to die. Whether or not Jinren's death had anything to do with them, they had to die. When he turned to look at the person who spoke, his expression changed again. Tsing Shichen, the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Revenue, Tsing Shichen. Both of them belonged to the King of Shu's faction and were core figures. Although they were not close friends, they had some friendship. He would not be surprised if it was anyone else who said that. Why did it have to be him? I only know that my son's body is now in the Li family. The 2 women who are related to this case are fine. I only want to seek justice for my dead son. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Works lowered his head and said. He looked around. In the court, several figures stood up. What interception? Emperor Jing asked in a deep voice. Your Majesty, I was about to report this to you. Lu Yidong raised his hands in a salute and said, last night, around 11 o'clock, Li Jianren, the son of Assistant Minister Li of the Ministry of Works, led a dozen or so assassins to surround and kill 2 women in a dark alley in Jingdou. 4 of the guards protecting the 2 women were injured. Later, they were rescued by a group of mysterious people. When they returned to the scene, the group of mysterious people, Assistant Minister Li, and 15 assassins had all disappeared. It was not until this morning that we found the bodies of a total of 16 people, including Li Jianren, somewhere in the capital. Emperor Jing frowned. The son of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Works was killed, and the son of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Works surrounded and killed women in the capital. These were 2 different things. One of the 2 girls is called Xing Zumo, Lu Yizhong said. Xing Zumo. A trace of doubt appeared on Emperor Jing's face. He always felt that he had heard this name somewhere before. Lu Yizhong explained, this Miss Tseng is the one who was framed for the murder of Qin. As soon as Lu Yizhong said this, the courtiers were suddenly stunned. Last time, the son of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights was poisoned and framed on a woman. The case had not been concluded yet, but it was certain that the person behind the scenes was directly targeting the woman surnamed Tseng. Because of County Uncle Li's protection last time, Lu Yizhong quickly solved the case, and the person's evil plan did not succeed. This time, County Uncle Li had just disappeared, and someone jumped out so impatiently. The matter behind this was a bit thought-provoking. If he thought more deeply, the disappearance of County Uncle Li, was it also? This was the thing that His Majesty cared about the most recently. No matter who was involved in this matter, there would not be any good results. Everyone could not avoid it. Although Li Jianren was dead, he still caused big trouble for his father. Emperor Jing's face darkened, and he asked, Assistant Minister Li, tell me, what did your son do last night? Assistant Minister Li's face changed. He bowed his head and said, I don't know, was it you? Emperor Jing suddenly asked. Your Majesty. Assistant Minister Li raised his head with a puzzled expression. County Uncle Li's disappearance, was it you who did it? Emperor Jing stood up and looked at him. Below, the middle-aged man was stunned, and then he hurriedly knelt down. Your Majesty, I guarantee with my head that the disappearance of County Uncle Chang and Li Yi has nothing to do with me. The son of the Assistant Minister took killers to kill 2 women. I have a group of good courtiers. Emperor Jing said coldly, "Come, take down Assistant Minister Li Yuankai of the Ministry of Works." In addition, the Supreme Court cooperate with the Ministry of Justice to thoroughly investigate whether the disappearance of County Uncle Chang and has anything to do with him, and the mysterious force that appeared last night. A mysterious force actually appeared under my nose. Investigate all of them. Investigate thoroughly. Today's morning court ended very late, and His Majesty was furious in the court. His Majesty had been furious a lot these days. Almost every day, an official would be dismissed or demoted. This time, the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Works, whose son had died, not only did he not get His Majesty's sympathy, but he also lost his life. The matter of Li Jianren, who was already dead, leading people to kill 2 women would not have much impact on Assistant Minister Li. But this time, what His Majesty wanted to investigate was obviously not just this matter. Today, all the officials who came out of the court understood one thing. The Li family was finished. Chapter 648. Compared to the Ministry of Revenue and the Ministry of Appointments, one of the 6 ministries, the Ministry of Works, did not seem as important. However, the fact that an assistant minister had been brought to the Ministry of Justice for investigation was still a considerable disturbance to the entire court. Although they didn't know what the result would be, based on the current situation, Assistant Minister Li was most likely dead. The results of the Ministry of Justice or the Secret Intelligence Bureau's investigations were always the results that the Emperor wanted. If they investigated meticulously, there was not a single person in the court who did not have a guilty conscience. The other officials were fine, but although the Emperor had changed greatly these days, even his temperament had become more ruthless and he was not as magnanimous and tolerant toward the mistakes of the court officials as before. There was only a certain limit. This time, Assistant Minister Li of the Ministry of Works had exceeded that limit. However, for some other officials, the 2 to 3 years of good times were truly unlucky. The officials in the faction were all suffering. Now, it was already the turn of a 4th-rank official. Even the King of Shu had been banished from the capital. Prime Minister Qin rarely spoke up in court. In just over a year, the advantage that he had gained over the past few decades had become negligible. The Emperor's health was getting worse, but he had banished the King of Shu and suppressed the officials in the King's faction. Could it be that the Emperor was so disappointed in him that he had other plans? These guesses and suspicions began to surface in the minds of more and more people and could not be dispelled. Why are there always so many idiots in this world? In a brothel somewhere in the capital, Qin Yu sipped a cup of wine and shook his head as he held a plump woman in his arms. Chen Lijun sighed and said, "The Li family is finished." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice personally led people to search their house today. Li Jianren's funeral has just been organized. I'm afraid they will have to do it again. This time, the Li family that the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Works belonged to would be completely erased from the list of influential officials in the capital. Li Jianren was dead. His death was not without meaning. At the very least, he had dragged the entire Li family with him to be buried with him. Chen Lijun raised his head and glanced around. In the entire capital, few people could compare to Qin Yu's hatred for Li Yi. However, even he could only endure and not do anything. Who gave those idiots the confidence? Clang! Cui Qingyu threw something on the table, making a crisp sound. He looked at the plump woman in Qin Yu's arms and said, "You go out first." "Thank you, young master." Seeing the sparkling and translucent bracelet on the table, the woman's eyes widened. She grabbed it and hid it in her sleeve, saying, "Thank you, young master, thank you, young master. This humble woman will leave right away." After the woman left, Qin Yu looked at Cui Qingyu with some surprise and asked, "When did you become so generous, giving out glass bracelets so casually? They're all worthless things." Cui Qingyu shook his head and said, "I have something to ask you." Qin Yu sighed and said, "The Cui family is really a big family. I can't compare. Cui Qingyu looked at him and asked seriously, "What is Prime Minister Qin thinking?" Qin glanced at him and asked, "Is the one talking to me Cui Qingyu or the eldest young master of the Cui family?" "Young Duke Qin." Cui Qingyu stood up, cupped his hands, and asked, "I need to know the attitude of your Qin family." At this moment, he represented the Cui family. After being rejected several times in the Qin family's mansion, the Cui family was eager to know the true attitude of Prime Minister Qin and the civil officials under him. Qin glanced at him, waved his hand, and said, "Sit down and talk." Not long after, in a tea house opposite a brothel, a man sitting by the window saw several young people coming out of the brothel, turned around, and went downstairs. Several performers invited by the tea house were performing on a temporary stage, and the seats below were full of guests. The man walked to a place and whispered to a middle-aged man sitting there, "Fifth master, they're coming out." Watching opera in a tea house is different from a brothel. "It's boring, let's go." The middle-aged man stood up and shook his head. The two walked out of the tea house and went straight to the opposite tea house. Ministry of Justice Prison. The former assistant minister of the Ministry of Work sat in front of a table. This cell was unusually clean, without a trace of strange smell. The food on the table in front of him was fragrant, and there was no lack of good wine and delicacies. He poured himself a cup of wine and leisurely enjoyed his meal. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, he slowly wiped his mouth with a clean handkerchief, looked at the young man opposite him and said, "Lord Liu, you have good methods." Liu Yizhang looked at him and said, "Is there anything else that Lord Li wants to eat? I'll tell them to buy it." The desire for good food is not worth mentioning. The assistant minister waved his hand and said, "I thought there would never be such a day. Heaven's plan is not as good as man's plan. I admire Lord Liu. If you don't want people to know, don't do it." Liu Yizhang shook his head and said, "If you knew it would be like this, why did you do it in the first place?" The middle-aged man opposite him smiled and said, "People in the court can't do what they want. Lord Liu is still young. You will understand in the future. In this court, who dares to say that he is clean both in front and behind him?" Liu Yizhang looked at him and asked, "So you're saying that Lord Li plans on shouldering these matters alone? Don't tell me you don't know what the consequences of adding up these crimes will be." The middle-aged man shook his head and said, "Let this matter end here. Otherwise, it will be a disaster for Lord Liu and not a blessing." After a pause, he raised his head to look at Liu Yizhang and said, "I do not seek to be dishonorable. I only hope that Lord Liu will be lenient and leave some descendants for my Li family. I will be extremely grateful." Liu Yizhang nodded and said, "Beyond the law, there is reason. Lord Li's request is not excessive." The middle-aged man stood up and bowed to him. "Thank you, Lord Liu." Liu Yizhang nodded and said, "However, before this, I have a question." "Lord Liu, please speak." Liu Yizhang looked at him and said word by word, "How much does Lord Li know about the matter at the Palace of Eternal Peace 20 years ago?" The middle-aged man's expression changed greatly, but he instantly recovered and shook his head. "I do not know what Lord Liu is talking about." Liu Yizhang looked at him and said, "In that case, I will take my leave." After saying this, he turned around and left decisively. "Protect the descendants of my Li family." As he stepped out of the cell, a voice with difficulty came from behind him. Between the lofty mountains and precipitous cliffs, a group of nearly 100 people was slowly moving around a few carriages. In front of one of the carriages, a man in yellow looked back and said, "How long do you think you will sleep today?" "I'll guess 20 hours. Another man in yellow thought for a moment and said, "I'll guess more than 20 hours. There are 24 hours in a day, and it's convenient to eat. I'll bet 1 tael of silver. I'll bet." Just as the other man finished speaking, the curtain of the carriage was lifted and the young man asked, "Where are we?" A man in yellow immediately said, "In a few more days, we will reach Shu province." The young man nodded, but he did not enter the carriage. Instead, he leaned against the front of the carriage and admired the surrounding scenery. Seeing this, the man in yellow was slightly startled and asked tentatively, You're not going to sleep?" "No." The young man shook his head and said, "It's stuffy in the carriage, so I came out to get some fresh air." The man in yellow counted with his fingers. In another 2 hours, he would have slept for a total of 11 hours in a day, and he would have one tael of silver in his hands. However, if he continued to enjoy the scenery, his silver would fly away. He looked at the young man and said in a low voice, "How about you go in and sleep a bit more? I'll help you roll up the curtain and open the window. That way, it won't be too stuffy." The young man thought for a moment and nodded. "That's fine." Not long after, another sound of gnashing teeth came from outside the carriage. "Damn it, you're cheating. Spare me, spare me, spare me." On the rugged mountain road, the 10 or so bandits who were extremely fierce just a moment ago were all kneeling on the ground. Their faces were pale and their voices were trembling. "Did you see it or not?" the young woman holding the sword asked coldly. "Yes, yes." A bald bandit hurriedly nodded and said, 2 days ago, there was a group of people like the heroine who passed by here. However, there were too many of them at that time, so we didn't dare to make a move." "Where did they go?" the woman asked coldly. "Shu province." The bald bandit immediately stretched out his hand and pointed in a certain direction. After a long time, there was no sound. He mustered up his courage and looked up. Finally, he let out a sigh of relief and sat down on the ground. That demoness had finally left. After a moment, the bald bandit turned around and gritted his teeth. "Who hasn't failed before? The first business failed, but it doesn't matter. I'll come back tomorrow." 1 day later. Senior, 3 days ago, the person you spoke of passed by here 3 days ago and went to Shu province." The bald bandit's face was covered in blood and his body was trembling as he spoke to an old man in front of him. "If I find out that you're lying to me, be careful of your head." The old man glanced at him and instantly disappeared. After a long time, the bald bandit crawled up from the ground, patted the dirt off his body and walked forward in a daze. "Big brother, where are you going?" A few anxious voices came from behind him. The bald bandit wiped his tears and said with a trembling voice, "I want to turn over a new leaf." Chapter 649. Located in the extreme west of the Jing Kingdom, Shu Province was remote and desolate, with only 5 small counties under its jurisdiction. Yong County, located in the southwest of Shu Province, was the last inhabited place in the west of the Jing Kingdom. 50 miles away from Yong County, there was a great river more than 1,000 feet wide. Crossing this river, one would officially enter the territory of the Qi Kingdom. Because it was remote, it was even poorer. The poorer a place was, the more chaotic it was, and the more chaotic it was, the poorer it was. It was an endless cycle with no solution. Therefore, bandits were rampant in Yong County, and the public security was extremely chaotic. Fortunately, they were only small groups of roving bandits, who only dared to wreak havoc in the villages around the county, not too close to it. 100 miles to the south was the truly terrifying place. It was the border between the Qi Kingdom, the Jing Kingdom, and the Wu Kingdom. It was an area that the 3 kingdoms did not care about. The mountain range stretched on endlessly, and the bandits and mountain bandits there were even more arrogant than the government. Often, there was no one living within 100 miles, which was truly desolate and uninhabited. Looking from afar, the city walls seemed thick, but the guards at the city gates were all listless and bored. Although this place was considered to be bordering the Qi Kingdom, and the relationship between the Jing Kingdom and the Qi Kingdom had always been tense, the army of the Qi Kingdom would not have to climb over the mountains that stretched for dozens of miles, and then cross the great river to come to this place. The unique geographical advantage did not cause Yong County to suffer from the chaos of war. Because of the existence of the provincial governor's mansion and the king of Shu's mansion, the public security of Yong County was more stable than that of other counties. A few carriages slowly approached from afar, and there were nearly 100 people accompanying them. Most of these people were dressed in blue or yellow, and they seemed to be well organized and disciplined. The soldiers guarding the gate shuddered, and one of them retreated into the gate and shouted from afar, "Stop, who are you?" A figure rushed over from behind, slapped him on the head, and scolded, "You blind bastard. This is an important guest of His Highness. Get out of here." Behind him, a man in purple hurried forward, walked to the front of the first carriage, and said in a low voice, "Your Highness, Protector has been waiting in the city for a long time." Behind them, a long yawn came from one of the carriages. Then, a young voice came from the carriage, "Why did you stop? Is it time to eat?" The yellow-clothed man next to the carriage had an expression of admiration on his face. He had lived for 30 years, but he had never seen someone so fond of sleeping. The admiration in his heart could no longer be described with words. The man in yellow shook his head and said in a low voice, "It's not dinner. We've arrived at Shuzhou, Yongzhou County Government." It could be seen that the county government office had been around for a long time. The outer walls were peeling, and the paint on the gate was almost gone. A bailiff ran into one of the houses in a panic and said anxiously, "Sir, bad news, bad news. Another village has become a bandit." The young man, who was dozing off on the chair, was startled. His eyes opened abruptly, and a look of anger appeared on his face. He casually smashed an inkstone on the table. "Bastard, didn't I tell you not to disturb me when I'm resting?" "I'm sorry, my lord." The bailiff dodged the inkstone and immediately bowed, saying, "But those villagers have reported it to the county government. The county magistrate has ordered you to investigate the case." Got it, got it. I'll go right away." Jiang Xian stood up from the chair angrily. He was a new jinshi in 1 year, but now he was appointed to be a county magistrate in such a remote place. What was the difference between this and being banished? At the thought of having to deal with those trivial things again, his heart was filled with strong resentment. 2 years ago, because he said something wrong in Prince Ning's mansion, his career was affected. His bright and promising future was gone. Seeing that his peers had a smooth career and left him far behind, he was naturally anxious. It was not easy for him to get close to the king of Shu. Before he had time to rejoice, the king of Shu was expelled from the Jing kingdom the next day. So he followed the king and became a county magistrate in the most remote place of the Jing kingdom. County magistrate. Was this what a scholar should do? He dealt with trivial cases all day long. Finally, there was a big case that he could make some achievements in. However, he vomited when he saw the crime scene. He didn't make any achievements. After that, he didn't eat meat for a whole month. He, Jiang Xian, had studied hard for more than 10 years just to suffer here. There weren't even any high-class brothels here. The so-called famous courtesans were all ugly and unsightly. Even in his dreams, he wanted to go back to Qing and Prefecture. The girls in the Golden Phoenix Pavilion and Jade's courtyard could only be described as beautiful. Sometimes he really doubted whether the king of Shu was the emperor's biological son. As the eldest son of the emperor, how could his fief be in such a remote place? This time, he was afraid that he had followed the wrong person. Another bailiff came in from outside and said, "My lord, the servants of the king's mansion have sent an invitation. The king of Shu will hold a banquet in the king's mansion tonight." Jiang Xian hurriedly said, "Just say that I will be there on time." In an inn in Yong County, Li Yi took the box from Taoist nun and looked at her and asked, "What is this?" The middle-aged Taoist nun looked at him and said lightly, "Tonight, you will go with me to the king of Shu's mansion. To avoid being recognized, wear this." Li Yi glanced at her and opened the box. He could not help but be slightly startled. He took out the thing in the box and a look of surprise appeared in his eyes. It was a mask. It looked not much different from the human skin masks seen on TV. It was very thin and soft to the touch. As if thinking of something, Li quickly threw it into the box and asked, "Is this thing made of human skin?" "No." The Taoist nun bluntly replied before turning around and leaving. Li picked it up again and examined it carefully. It didn't look like human skin, and it didn't smell strange. He didn't know what material it was made of. It was surprising that such an exquisite thing existed in this era. After a while, looking at a blurry shadow in the bronze mirror, Li touched his face, feeling both surprised and amazed. If he observed it carefully in the day, there might be some flaws. But at night, after wearing this thing, there was no trace of Photoshop. He did not know how it was made. After a while, Li carefully took it off and put it away. Then, he looked at the candle on the table and was lost in thought. Along the way, he did not have enough opportunities to leave clues. He was also not sure if Rui and the others could get the news. Outside of Shu State was the Qi Kingdom. Once he stepped into the territory of the Qi Kingdom, it would be more troublesome to get rid of them. But now, this Taoist nun was watching him very closely. She even wanted to bring him to the King of Shu's banquet. There were not many opportunities to escape. Right now, he could only take it one step at a time. In a room on the upper floor of the inn, a young man dressed in a luxurious robe smiled and said to Taoist nun, "Auntie, after this period of contact, I realized that this King of Shu is a complete idiot. I only used a little trick and gained his trust. This person can be put to good use. Although this person is stupid, he has a strong background. Even the Cui family is standing behind him. In the imperial court, he has hundreds to answer his call. When the time comes, with his influence in the imperial court, it will be more convenient for us to do things. We can use him to deal with matters in the open, and in the end, we can be the fisherman who reaps the benefits." The young man's smile was somewhat proud. When he talked about the King of Shu, his face naturally revealed a look of mockery. "I said before, don't get too close to Li." The middle-aged Taoist nun looked at him with a frown and said, "Have you forgotten how the Fong family only has the two of us left? The Fong family and the imperial family of the Jing Kingdom are absolutely irreconcilable. Naturally, this hatred will not be forgotten. As long as I am alive, I will make the Li family watch the Jing Kingdom fall," the young man said through gritted teeth. Then, he said seriously, "However, before that, for the sake of the greater good, it is necessary to endure." Chapter 650. Fate really made fools of people. Li remembered that the first time he got involved with the King of Shu was also in the King of Shu residence. It was the same invitation and the same king's mansion. The only difference was that the first time was in the capital city, and this time it was in Shuzhou. After going around in circles, everything seemed to be back to square one, but in fact, the route had already gone astray. At least the King of Shu had gone astray. He was a noble prince with a powerful background. Instead of being a prince in the capital city and waiting to inherit the throne, he had to go to such a remote and desolate place. Why bother? Li walked downstairs with the Taoist nun. A middle-aged man came out of a room. Seeing him, he was stunned and asked, "Aunt, who is this?" "An important guest." The Taoist nun seemed unwilling to explain too much, so she just said one sentence. The young man looked at Li suspiciously, but did not say anything. He walked to the other side of the Taoist nun. Li touched his cheek. It was stuck quite tightly, so it should not fall out suddenly. Otherwise, he was not sure whether the King of Shu would be scared to the point of having a heart attack or something like that if he showed his true self in front of the King of Shu. Even if he did not, he had to be careful. Li weighed in his heart whether to be taken to the Qi Kingdom by the Taoist nun or to show his true self in the King of Shu's territory. He felt that the former was less dangerous. Fortunately, the king of Shu did not know that the reason why he was banished to Shuzhou was that he spared no effort to help him for free. Otherwise, even if the Taoist nun was a grandmaster, she might not be able to stop him. Yong County was not large, and the king's mansion was located in the most prosperous part of the county. Before entering the mansion, the first impression Li Yi had was that it was shabby. It was too shabby. He had been to two mansions, Prince Ning's mansion in Qing and Prefecture and the King of Shu's mansion in the capital city. He had been to countless palaces in the Imperial Palace, but the King of Shu's mansion in Yong County was indeed the shabbiest one he had ever seen. Based on this, it could be inferred that the King of Shu's life here should not be very comfortable. Li Yi's guess was right. The King of Shu was indeed not living a comfortable life. Anyone who was banished from the capital, the center of power, to this place would not be in a good mood. Not only was it remote, it was also impoverished. Even though he was known as the King of Shu, he had never thought that he would one day come to this place. Why are you dilly-dallying? Have you not eaten yet? The King of Shu walked out of a spacious room and pointed at the maids and servants who were in a hurry. He frowned and said, "I's banquet is about to begin. If you delay, be careful of your heads." There was nothing good about Shu. The place was not good, and the people were not good. Even the servants in the manor were not as easy to order around as they were in Jingdou. The King of Shu had never hated the word Shu as much as he did now. A figure walked over from afar with a face full of smiles. He first cupped his hands and bowed to the King of Shu before saying, "Your Highness, there's good news from the capital." A look of joy appeared on the King of Shu's face. He immediately asked, "What news? Did Father summon me back to the capital?" The man revealed an awkward expression and said, "No, Your Highness." The King of Shu's expression became a little ugly. He asked, "What's the good news?" The man said embarrassedly, "Your Highness, Li Yi, the County Earl of Chang'an, has been missing for nearly a month. I'm afraid he's dead." Hearing a certain name, the King of Shu's spirit was lifted. He asked, "Who are you talking about?" The man immediately said, "Li Yi, the County Earl of Chang'an, Li Yi." "Li Yi is missing?" The King of Shu asked in surprise. "Yes, this news just came from the imperial court. It should be true." The man was the chief clerk of the King of Shu's mansion. At this moment, as soon as he received the letter from the imperial court, he immediately came to report. "Is he dead?" The King of Shu asked expectantly. The man was stunned and said, "There's no specific news yet. The imperial court said that County Earl Li was kidnapped by bandits. He went all the way to the west and may pass by Shu State. They asked the local officials to pay attention to this matter. If they find any trace of County Earl Li, they must find a way to rescue him." Rescue him? County Earl Li is the pillar of our Jing kingdom. We must find a way to rescue him. The King of Shu sneered and said, "Send someone to the provincial governor's mansion and then to the government offices of all counties. If there's any news of Li Yi, they must report to I immediately." "Yes." The man bowed and quickly retreated. Li Yi. A cold smile appeared on the King of Shu's face. He said, "You'd better pray to God that he won't fall into my hands this time." It was getting late, and guests began to arrive gradually. Although Shuzhou was the King of Shu's fief, it was the local gentry and aristocrats who held firm control over Shuzhou. Even though the Cui family had been operating here for a long time, they were not legitimate. After the King of Shu arrived in Shuzhou, he frequently held such banquets. Most of the guests were the local gentry. If he could gain the support of these people, he would be able to firmly control Shuzhou and have nothing to worry about in the future. "Greetings, Your Highness." "Greetings, Your Highness." Tonight, there were local officials, but most of them were young talents who were somewhat famous in Shu State. They represented the various forces behind them. The king of Shu glanced at them and estimated the number of people. He was generally satisfied. Greetings, Alliance Master. 100 miles away, under the night sky, an old man leaned against a tree trunk. He took out a small porcelain bottle, took out a pill, and threw it into his mouth. Bah, it's so bitter. After a moment, he mumbled to himself and took out a cloth bag from his bosom. He carefully took out a milky white square object that was about the size of a fingernail and threw it into his mouth. He mumbled, "That damn Taoist nun, she sure runs fast." Chapter 651. The Taoist nun and the young man surnamed Fong went into the hall to discuss something with the king of Shu. Several people in blue stood behind Li Yi. They seemed to be protecting him, but they were actually watching over him. Li Yi looked back in a certain direction. The king of Shu had actually hooked up with the people of the cult. The old emperor was not dead yet. Did this guy really want to rebel? Li Yi did not know the purpose of this holy religion for the time being. But historical experience told him that it would be a pity if a civil organization gathered more than 100,000 people did not rebel. Along the way, he got a lot of information from the words of these followers. The headquarters of this saint sect was in the kingdom of Qi, and the 100,000 followers were also in the kingdom of Qi. According to the situation they encountered along the way, they had obviously developed to a certain extent in the Jing kingdom. It was just that they didn't know if there were any traces of them in other countries. If there were, this organization was too big. If these people wanted to rebel, the old emperor would probably have a headache. "Brother, you look unfamiliar. You are not from Shuzhou, are you?" A voice came from the side. Li Yi turned his head and saw a young man holding a wine glass and walking towards him. Li Yi felt that he was a little familiar. He must have seen him before, but he should not have talked to him much. Because except for a little familiar, he really could not find anything more about him in his memory. Li Yi nodded and said, "No, I am from the capital city. I am Jiang Xian, the former county lieutenant of Yong County." The young man smiled and sat down beside him. Jiang Xian. Li Yi finally found more information through this name. Prince Ning's mansion, Jiang Xian, Cui Yanxin, who had made things difficult for Wan Ruoqing in Prince Ning's mansion. Later, there was a big storm. The main culprits were this man and Cui Yanxin. Later, he heard that they were implicated because of this. Among the Jinshe candidates of the same year, only these two were temporarily suppressed. After that, he met Cui Yanxin in the king's mansion of Shu. He did not expect to meet another old friend in this desolate Shuzhou. Li Yi cupped his hands and said, "Greetings, Master Jiang. I am Li Xian. Brother Li is too polite. Just call me Xian." Jiang Xian smiled and said, "However, Brother Li's name is exactly the same as that of a friend of mine." Li Yi looked at him with a smile and asked, "Brother Jiang, are you talking about the heir of King Ning, Li Xian?" Jiang Xian was stunned for a moment, then he smiled and said, "I forgot that Brother Li is from the capital city. You must have heard of young Prince Li Xian's name." Li Yi cupped his hands and said, "Young Prince Li Xian is one of the 3 heroes of the capital city. I didn't expect Brother Jiang to be familiar with him. My apologies." "You're flattering me." Jiang Xian waved his hand and smiled nonchalantly. He said, "This is nothing. Li Yi, the Earl of Chang'an County, and I'm also close friends. I didn't tell Brother Li, did I?" "Oh. Brother Jiang and that Li Yi are close friends." Li Yi looked surprised. He lowered his voice and said, "I heard that the king of Shu and that Li Yi have a deep feud." "Brother Jiang, you..." Jiang Xian was stunned for a moment, then he laughed and said, "I'm just joking. Brother Li, don't take it seriously. I am not that close to that Li Yi. Brother Li, don't spread rumors." Jiang Xian changed the topic and asked, "Brother Li, Are you familiar with that brother Fong? What is his background? Not really. Li Yi shook his head and said, in fact, today is the first time I've seen him. Jiang Ziyan looked a little disappointed. The king of Shu's attitude towards the brother Fong was very unusual. If he could make friends with him, he might have a way out in the future. He had originally wanted to find out something from this place, but this goal had failed. Brother Jiang is the county lieutenant of Yong County. Li Yi suddenly looked at him and asked. Since he had nothing to do, it was good to listen to Brother Jiang brag and kill time. Jiang Ziyan nodded with flagging interest. When he was about to leave after a few words, he suddenly heard the young man opposite him say, to tell you the truth, I was also a county lieutenant for a period of time. Huh? Jiang Ziyan was stunned and asked, Brother Li was also a county lieutenant. Yes, Li Yi sighed and said, the past is unbearable. Let's not talk about it, let's not talk about it. At a certain moment, the way Jiang Ziyan looked at him immediately changed. He let out a long sigh and said, we are all in the same boat. I didn't expect that Brother Li and I would have the same experience. He drank the wine in his cup, sighed again, and said, people like us have studied hard for more than 10 years in order to enter the official career. But fate makes fools of us. I, Jiang Ziyan, have ambitions, but I can only hide in a place like this and become a small county officer. The king of Shu smiled and said, don't worry. From now on, you can do whatever you want in Shuzhou. But don't forget what you promised of course. The man surnamed Fong walked out of the main hall and turned back to salute the king of Shu. He said, Your Highness, you don't have to send me off. After saying this, he turned and left with the Taoist nun. Seeing the two of them walk away, a man behind the king of Shu said, Your Highness, are we really going to cooperate with them? I'm afraid that this person has wild ambitions and will be a big trouble. The king of Shu waved his hand and said in a low voice, When I ascend to the throne, I won't be afraid of his little ambitions. Don't worry. The day I ascend to the throne will be the day they are destroyed. The middle-aged Taoist nun who was walking in front stopped and turned her head. The king of Shu saw her from afar and laughed loudly. Take care, Taoist. Jiang Ziyan's eyes were hazy from the alcohol. He patted the table and said, In the future, if Brother Li has any trouble in Yong County, you can come to the county government to find me. Li Yi smiled and cupped his hands. Thank you, Lord Jiang. Jiang Ziyan waved his hand and said with dissatisfaction, There's no need to be polite between us. Just call me Ziyan. Seeing the Taoist nun coming from afar, Li Yi said, I'm afraid I have to go. Brother Jiang, let's meet again if fate allows it. Remember to come to the county government to find me. Jiang Ziyan lay on the table and murmured. Then he fell into a deep sleep. Seeing Jiang Ziyan's appearance, the man surnamed Fong asked in surprise, Do you know each other before? We just met. Maybe it was the common experience that triggered some kind of emotion in Brother Jiang's heart. After a few words, Brother Jiang treated him as a bosom friend and confided in him. Brother Jiang wished they had known each other for 20 years and almost became sworn brothers on the spot. Of course, it could be just because of his personal charm. After all, although the mask covered his face, it could not cover his temperament. If the mask was taken off, the effect would be better. Our power in the Jing kingdom is still very weak. Although there are many believers in the capital, they are now being watched by the government and dare not act rashly. In a place like Shuzhou, the government is not very active, which is more suitable for the development of the holy religion. Now that we have reached an agreement with the king of Shu, he will not stop us and will even provide us with convenience. However, at present, we are still a little short of silver, and the king of Shu is not willing to provide us with it. He did not know if the young man did not treat him as an outsider or if what he said at the moment was not considered confidential. Li Yi was slightly surprised. This guy, the king of Shu, was really messing around with these people. It would be best if we can let him become a believer of our holy religion. The king of Shu is the eldest son of the emperor of the Jing kingdom. He is most likely to live in the East Palace. In the future, when he inherits the throne and ascends to the throne, when the young man was talking about these things with some excitement, a voice suddenly came from behind. The king of Shu is most likely to inherit the throne. Li Yi looked at the young man in surprise and asked, "Don't you usually pay attention to court affairs?" The young man was stunned. He turned around and looked at Li Yi with a frown. He asked, "What do you mean? Have you ever thought about why the king of Shu was banished to Shuzhou when he was doing well in the capital? Which emperor would banish the crown prince out of the capital when he was seriously ill? A few months ago, Prime Minister Qin no longer supported the king of Shu. The king of Shu's faction has already lost the support of Prime Minister Qin. Have you ever thought about the reason behind this? Why doesn't the School of Mathematics, which the imperial court has placed high hopes on, have any students who are related to the king of Shu? In just half a year, the imperial court has undergone several major purges. Have you ever investigated who were the ones who were purged? Have you ever thought about what will happen to the 100,000 believers by acting so rashly? What holy religion? Li Yi felt that he had overestimated them. Their reputation was very domineering, but their intelligence system was simply rubbish. They used old calendars as the latest information. It would be fine if they did not rebel, but once they did, they would die sooner or later. The Taoist nun turned to look at Li Yi with a thoughtful expression. The young man's expression froze. He opened his mouth and asked, "Is what you said true?" Chapter 652. Is what you said true? Li Yi glanced at him and saw that the youth surnamed Fong was looking at him suspiciously. Li Yi shook his head slightly. This young man's question was not up to standard. No one knew the cause and effect of these incidents better than him. He knew what others knew, and he knew the details that others did not. No one knew better than him how the once lofty king of Shu had fallen step by step to the state he was in today. Of course, it was all his own doing. As an outsider, he could not bear to watch a good hand of cards being played to such a state. Now that things had come to this, the king of Shu was destined not to be the emperor. If he left Shu for the capital now, he would die halfway through the journey. This was already decided when he left the capital. If he really colluded with the Taoist nuns' faction, there would be more trouble when the time came. Therefore, it was necessary to persuade these people to change their ways. It was not easy for such a large sect to start from scratch. It would be a pity if the king of Shu, who had cheated his teammates for 20 years, were to destroy the foundation that they had built up over the past few decades. Even Li Yi himself could not bear to do so. Thank you for your reminder, brother. I will investigate carefully. The youth surnamed Fong cupped his hands and said, "We are all on the same side, it is what I should do." Li Yi waved his hand and walked into the inn. He instructed the waiter downstairs, "Send some food and wine up later." Just now in the king of Shu's mansion, he had only heard brother Jiang boast and sigh, spittle flying everywhere and ruined a table of food. Now he was a little hungry. The waiter hurriedly replied, "All right, sir, please go up first. I will go to the kitchen and inform them. The food and wine will be here soon." Not long after Li Yi stepped into the room, in another guest room, the youth surnamed Fong said with a gloomy face, "Get the person in charge of gathering information in the capital to come here." Not long after, a blue-robed man hurried in and said, "Protector, what instructions do you have?" The youth surnamed Fong looked at him and asked, "Have there been any major changes in the capital's court these past few months?" The man in blue thought for a moment and said, "There are no major changes. It's just that a few days ago, the emperor of the Jing kingdom sent people to investigate the accounts of the officials in the capital. Later, many officials were dismissed. Recently, after we left the capital, there was quite a bit of turmoil in the court. Every day, there is new information. I haven't had time to sort it out. The youth surnamed Fong said in a deep voice, bring me all the information you've gathered. Yes, guardian. After a while, the man in blue took a thick book and walked into the room again. The youth surnamed Fong sat down in front of the table and quickly flipped through the pages. As time passed, his expression became increasingly ugly. The king of Shu incited public opinion and attempted to force the abdication of the throne. He was expelled from the capital, the Divination Academy, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Revenue, the purge of the imperial court, the son of the assistant minister of the Ministry of Works has been killed. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Works will have his property confiscated. The women will be given lowly status, and the men will be exiled for 3,000 li. Useless. The youth surnamed Fong slammed the table fiercely and stood up from his chair. The man in blue hurriedly knelt on the ground and said loudly, I did not do my job well. Please punish me, guardian. The youth surnamed Fong did not look at him and muttered, if the holy religion wastes its resources on this kind of useless person, I'm afraid it will be like drawing water with a wicker basket. Before this, he had always thought that the king of Shu was the only candidate to inherit the throne. After hearing the man's words and carefully understanding the current situation, he finally understood that the situation in the imperial court of the Jing kingdom had changed so much. Although he had a deep hatred for the current Emperor Jing, he would not think that he was a fatuous ruler without talent and virtue. He would not be so fatuous that he would banish the crown prince thousands of miles away when he was seriously ill and carry out a purge in the court to reduce the power behind him. The only explanation was that the king of Shu no longer had a chance to become the emperor. Although useless people are useless, they still have some use. A cold smile appeared on the youth surnamed Fong's face and he said, pass down the order, come on, send these dishes to the guest in room 7 upstairs. The waiter brought out a tray and put it on the table. After giving the order, he went back to the kitchen to busy himself. I'll do it. A waiter was about to run over when a handsome manservant came out of the kitchen. He carried the dishes with both hands and walked upstairs. In the room, Li Yi sat at the table and poured a cup of tea. He sipped it and was lost in thought as he looked at the flickering candlelight. That damned Taoist nun was really a headache. In the past, when he was with Rui all day long, he did not feel that a grandmaster was very powerful. Previously, he did not feel that Taoist nun was very dangerous. Now he finally understood why all the people in the martial arts world changed their expressions when talking about a grandmaster. Every time he woke up, he felt that this Taoist nun was even more unfathomable. This kind of feeling really made him feel helpless. He held the teacup with a little force. With a crack, the teacup broke. Finally, when he opened his hand, there was only a pile of white powder left in his palm. There was a knock on the door. It should be his supper. With his back to the door, Li Yi was too lazy to look back. He said casually, the door is not closed. Come in. Then there was the creaking sound of the door opening. Just put it here. Li Yi pointed to the table casually, clapped his hands, and said, remember to close the door when you go out. The manservant put the dishes on the table and turned to leave. Soon, Li Yi heard the sound of the door closing. Shuzhou was really a remote place. The chef in the inn's kitchen was obviously not good at cooking. The dishes were black and had no appetite. Li Yi did not even recognize what the dishes were. He took a small bite with a tentative mind, and his brows furrowed tightly. He took another bite and sighed, this cooking skill is probably on par with that of Mississippi Liu. After saying this, his body inexplicably shivered and his hair stood on end. He slowly turned his head and saw a figure standing behind him. At this time, the figure was looking at him coldly with his arms crossed. Li Yi's eyes widened and he blurted out, Ru. He was only able to say one word before his mouth was blocked by the figure. Separated by a wall, the middle-aged Taoist nun sitting cross-legged on the bed slowly opened her eyes. Ru. Gua, I can give up the whole world, but at least I have you, who is worth cherishing. And you are here, the miracle of life. There was a strange song coming from the other side. It was not the music that was popular in the Qi kingdom or the Jing kingdom. It inevitably sounded a little different, but if one listened carefully, it was still pleasing to the ear. In addition, there were other voices coming. Young man, don't go back. Sit down and have a drink with me. Let me tell you, you'd better fire the chef in the back kitchen of the inn as soon as possible. It will affect the business. If you don't believe me, you can try it yourself. The middle-aged Taoist nun shook her head. That Li Yi had always given her the feeling that he was different. He always did things that ordinary people could not understand. Until now, she had become much more used to it. If she thought about it carefully, those who were capable were mostly like this. They had some strange habits or behaviors, so she had always turned a blind eye to these things. There were still many things that she needed him in the future. Even if she could not make him loyal, she could not cause too much disgust. The middle-aged Taoist nun turned her head and looked at him, then slowly closed her eyes. Chapter 653. Hey, brother, why don't you speak? Are you mute? Li Yi said. He dipped his index finger in the tea and wrote a line on the table. The Taoist nun is next door. Are you alone? Mississippi Lu nodded and then pointed to his face. Li Yi was stunned for a moment, and his eyes widened again. Are you really alone? He mouthed. Mississippi Lu nodded and pointed to his face again. Rui. Li Yi had just written 2 words on the table when Mississippi Lu nodded slightly and pointed to his face again. The important thing now was not his face, but how they could escape. Li Yi waved his hand, reached to his ear, touched the edge of the mask, and tore it off. Hiss, he almost cried out in pain. He covered his burning face with both hands, and tears were about to flow out of his eyes. I'm sorry, I didn't know you were mute. With tears in his eyes, Li Yi choked with sobs and said apologetically, I'm sorry, I used to have a friend who suffered from aphasia, but he is no longer here. I'm sad and lost my composure. I'm sorry, wait here. I'll find a way. Second Miss Lu wrote a line of words on the table with tea. She took a deep look at him, turned around, and left. Li Yi stood up and said, Brother, hey, brother, don't go. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean to say you were mute. Watching Mississippi Lu walk out, Li Yi closed the door and sat back at the table. Mississippi Lu actually caught up with him. This was probably the best thing that had happened in recent days. Although the two of them together were no match for the Taoist nun, they inexplicably felt much more at ease in their hearts. Of course, if second great uncle wasn't worried about his old arms and legs and could come along, he wouldn't be here right now. Instead, he would be in the room next door, making that Taoist nun kneel down and say that she conquered him. Every time he woke up, he would silently express his admiration for second great uncle in his heart. Using cheats wasn't scary. What was scary was using cheats for a lifetime. He looked at the pile of powder on the table and couldn't imagine what kind of realm second granduncle had reached. Having an old man at home was like having a treasure. Calculating it, the old man could still sleep for a few decades. The current him was already terrifying enough. After a few more decades, would he really be able to break through the void with his sleep? Li Yi picked up his chopsticks. At this time, he no longer felt that the dishes on the table were unpalatable. Soon, he ate them all. Not long after he put down his chopsticks, there was a knock on the door. Little brother, are you here to collect the plates? Li Yi quickly walked over and opened the door. When he saw Taoist nun standing outside, he walked straight into the room. The middle-aged Taoist nun sat on a chair in the room and asked, Has your hypersomnia not recurred in the past 2 days? Li Yi closed the door and walked over. He said, "It's easy to get sleepy after sitting in the carriage for a long time. I'm much better these days. I've long heard that you have a grudge against the king of Shu." Li Yi waved his hands repeatedly. "It's just a small matter, you're right about one thing. The treatment that the king of Shu has received is indeed not what a crown prince should have." The middle-aged Taoist nun looked at him and said, "But don't forget that he is the eldest son. No matter how mediocre he is, he has the Cui family behind him. There are so many big families and so many courtiers. It's reasonable for him to be the emperor. You also know that Emperor Jing doesn't have much time left. This time, the king of Shu has only touched the bottom line of an emperor. Once Emperor Jing's illness worsens, the king of Shu is bound to be summoned back to the capital city. Have you ever thought about how you and the Li family should behave at that time?" Of course, Li Yi had thought about this matter. Because he knew that he and the king of Shu were like fire and water, he had long left a way out for the Li family. That was why he had done so much for the eldest princess for free. That was why he had sent the king of Shu out of the capital city. That was why he had caused the king of Shu's faction to be greatly weakened. That was why the king of Shu could only stay in Shuzhou for the rest of his life. Once he left Shuzhou, he would face the pursuit of countless killers. With the title of the king of killers, killing a person in 10 steps and unstoppable in 1,000 miles, and the temptation of 10,000 taels of silver, there would always be a lot of people who couldn't resist such a generous treatment. If 10,000 taels of silver was not enough, then 20,000 taels of silver. Whether it was fame or profit, he would definitely satisfy those people. The Taoist nun said again, "You should know that the day the king of Shu ascends the throne will be the day the Li family is destroyed. Although the Jing kingdom is big, there is no place for you." "That's right." Li Yi nodded. In principle, what the Taoist nun said was not wrong at all. Even if you hide in other countries, I don't think you will have a good life. The middle-aged Taoist nun looked at Li Yi and said, "As long as you join the holy religion, I can definitely guarantee the safety of you and the Li family. At that time, you can follow the holy religion to overthrow the Li family's imperial power. Then, you will be above tens of thousands of people. I have asked you to consider this a long time ago. What do you think now?" Li Yi sighed and said, "I am not talented and incompetent. I really don't know what I can do for you, Taoist nun. You don't have to be modest." The middle-aged Taoist nun shook her head and said, "Among the younger generation of the Qi kingdom and the Jing kingdom, the only one who can compare with you is the third prince of the Qi kingdom. You are different from him. In the whole world, you are the only one who can catch my eye." These words made Li Yi blush a little. Although this Taoist nun was a little bad, her words were rarely to the point. She was also born with a pair of sharp eyes and had once saved him. If it wasn't for the fact that she took advantage of Rui's pregnancy and kidnapped him, he might have had a good impression of her. Unfortunately, he was not interested in rebelling against the old emperor. Moreover, the holy religion was a good thing. This Taoist nun was obviously not a good leader. Even the most basic intelligence system was a mess. It was really unbearable. Li Yi looked at her and asked, "What do you want me to do, Taoist nun?" The middle-aged Taoist nun said, "Lioli, Tianfa. As long as you do your best for the holy religion, I will definitely not mistreat you." Lioli didn't care. This thing would not be valuable for long. It was estimated that there was already a trend of a blowout. Not long after, not only the Jing kingdom, but also the Qi kingdom, the Zhao kingdom and the Wu kingdom would not be spared. He had already made arrangements for these things before he left. Tianfa naturally couldn't be given to him. If this thing were to be spread out and obtained by the Qi kingdom, the Jing kingdom would probably be doomed. It would be hard for them to live in the future. A conflicted expression appeared on Li Yi's face. This Taoist nun was too powerful. Moreover, he was still in her hands. At present, there was no good way to get the holy religion into his hands. It was not so easy to change the mind of a fanatic. Tianfa definitely couldn't be given to him. Are you worried that I will burn the bridge after crossing the river? The middle-aged Taoist nun saw his hesitation. She threw a token on the table and said, "Take this token, and you will be the protector of the holy religion. Your status will only be below mine. I will give you another half a month to think about it." After saying this, the middle-aged Taoist nun glanced at him and directly turned to leave. Li Yi took out the token and held it in his hand to have a look. It was actually a jade token. It was heavy and felt very good. According to the man in blue, the holy religion had more than 100,000 believers in the Qi kingdom and the Jing kingdom. Didn't it mean that with this token, he would be below one person and above tens of thousands of people? It was only below one person and above tens of thousands of people. If this Taoist nun accidentally walked on the road and was hit by a meteorite or choked to death while eating or drinking, wouldn't he be the new hierarch? No, they believed in the Empress. What should he be called? The Heavenly Duke. No, that was too unpleasant to hear. How about calling it the Ming cult? If it was called the Ming cult, he would be the hierarch. Moreover, the name Ming cult was good for publicity. The Sun Moon cult is accomplished in both literature and martial arts. It will benefit the common people for thousands of generations and unify the martial world. The sacred fire of light shakes the earth and burns away all injustice in the world. The hierarch will enjoy immortal fortune forever and live as long as the heavens. Listen, this was a professional slogan. Just a few people shouting at the top of their lungs that the Divine Empress had appeared and that the Divine Empress was protecting them. The pretentiousness was immediately lowered. If they wanted to gain believers, shouldn't they first shout the slogan a little louder? Under the same conditions, if this stall was left to him to manage, it was possible that his believers would already be spread all over the world. With a single call, he would be able to rebel against the old emperor with a wave of his hand. He would be able to blackmail him all day long and find things for him to do. With this thought, Li Yi's gaze once again turned to the jade token in his hand. The protector of the cult was full of sincerity. Chapter 654. The Ru family inn was the largest inn in Yong County. It was also the most famous inn in the entire Shu prefecture. Although the inn had only been built for less than a year, because of its comfortable environment, attentive service, and friendly price, its reputation had long spread. Regardless of whether it was a passerby or a passing merchant, they were all willing to stay here. Single rooms, standard rooms, husband and wife rooms, family rooms, luxurious rooms, chess rooms, and a series of rooms were available to meet the needs of all kinds of guests. Although it was located in the desolate Shu prefecture, the business of the Ru family inn had always been booming. Since they moved here, in just a few months, 3 inns in Yong County had closed. Even the shops had been bought by the Ru family inn. It should be time to open a branch. Just like the name of the inn, it was like home. It gave its guests the feeling of being at home. Step by step, the Ru family inn had clearly achieved this. At this time, it was only early in the morning, but there were already many people busy at the entrance of the inn. Erlang, move quickly. We need to set up the platform before noon. A bare-chested man was moving things out of the hostel next to the inn. He turned around and urged another skinny figure. The young man laughed and said, "Big brother, don't worry. We can make it." Someone behind him teased, "Old Jew, why are you moving so little at once? Are you tired from having fun with the brothel girls yesterday? Let me give you a piece of advice. It's fine to go to brothels every now and then. How can you go there 3 times a day?" This man's name was Zhu Dong. He had a younger brother at home. Everyone usually called him Zhu Daolang. The 2 brothers were originally butchers and later worked in the brothel. After interacting with each other for a while, they were already familiar with each other. Zhu Daolong waved his hand and scolded, "Get out of here. I don't need you to care about my business. Hurry up. If you're late and make the manager unhappy, you'll lose this month's bonus. You're just afraid that you won't have a bonus." A burst of laughter came from behind him. Inside the inn, a waiter walked out and asked, "Hey, old Zhu, you're here again today. You guys are making so much noise outside. Aren't you disturbing our business?" Bah. Zhu Daolong cast a sidelong glance at him and said, "Disturbing your business, has your conscience been eaten by a dog? Without us, would your business be so good?" The waiter smiled sheepishly and hurried over to help him unload the things on his shoulders and put them on the empty space beside him. The brothel business was booming. When it was mealtime, some people were too lazy to go back, so they just ate in the inn. It was also a great boost to their business. To a certain extent, the reason why the Ru family inn was so popular was because there was a brothel next to it. When the guests were free, they only needed to take a few steps downstairs to find a place to spend their time. Of course, although one of them worked in an inn and the other worked in a brothel, they were still a family. Back then, it had been a tough journey, so they didn't care about these small matters. "Hey, that brothel is going to have a benefit performance again today. It's rare, it's rare. I've missed it the last few times. I'll come over to reserve a seat after I finish my meal. I don't know what to sing today. I like Legend of the White Snake, I like Pua Mulan. Mu Guiying is fine too." The passers-by stood in the distance and whispered to each other. There were also people coming out of the surrounding shops to take a look. The show at the brothel was really good. Every once in a while, they would bring out the stage to perform for free. It would be a waste not to watch it. They had to reserve a seat now, or they would have to stand in a while. Li Yi stretched his body. Recently, he hadn't been eating or sleeping well. It had been a long time since he had such a comfortable sleep. He opened the door and saw a waiter walking up with a tray. Li Yi's face lit up. He patted him on the shoulder and said, "Hey, brother, it's you again. I'm really sorry about last night. Come, put the things in." 15 minutes later, the waiter walked out of the room. Downstairs, the man with the surname Fong walked out of the room. Immediately, a man in blue came up to him and said, "Envoy, everything is ready. When do we start?" "Tonight at midnight." The man with the surname Fong said in a low voice and walked upstairs. The waiter brushed past him. The man with the surname Fong suddenly stopped and said, "Stop." He turned his head and looked at the waiter and asked, "Are you a waiter here? Why didn't I see you a few days ago?" The handsome waiter looked at him indifferently. There was no change in his expression. "Raise your head." The man with the surname Fong had a look of doubt on his face. He extended his hand to hold the waiter's chin. His other hand reached out from the side and grabbed the waiter's wrist. Li Yi looked at him with a smile and said, "Brother Fong, this brother can't speak." The waiter glanced at Li Yi and turned to go downstairs. "Stop." A hint of anger appeared on the man with the surname Fong's face. Just as he was about to chase after him, the hand firmly grabbed his wrist. He couldn't break free no matter how hard he tried. His expression changed slightly. When he turned his head to look at Li Yi, a strange expression finally appeared on his face. Li Yi loosened his grip. The man with the surname Fong looked at him and said, "I've underestimated you before." After saying that, a hand suddenly reached out and went straight for Li Yi's throat. Bang! After a dull sound, Li Yi took 2 steps back. The young man's body swayed on the spot and an unnatural red flush appeared on his face. Li Yi waved his hand. This guy was indeed powerful. Back at the Heroes Conference, he was able to fight Yang Luqing to a standstill. He was not someone that Li Yi could defeat just by sleeping a few times. Paw! As he waved his sleeve, something flew out from his sleeve and landed on the floor, making a clear sound. The man with the surname Fong instinctively lowered his head to take a look. After being stunned for a moment, his expression changed greatly the next moment. Blue Dragon Envoy. He suddenly raised his head to look at Li Yi and said angrily, "How is this possible?" Thump. The two men in blue behind him immediately knelt on the ground and said loudly, "Your subordinates greet the left guardian." The man with the surname Fong took a step forward and picked up the token on the ground. He flipped it over and looked at it. The azure dragon pattern carved on it was vivid and lifelike. He took out another token from his waist. It looked almost exactly the same as this one, but what was carved on it was a white tiger. Azure dragon on the left and white tiger on the right. The azure dragon was the leader, and the white tiger was the support. The left guardian of the holy religion. The left protector whose status was only below that of the empress. He narrowed his eyes, looked at Li Yi, and said coldly, "Where did you get this token? Tell me the truth." Li Yi calmly glanced at him and did not say anything. A trace of anger appeared on the young man's face. He turned to the two men in blue behind him and said, "You two, capture him. I'll go ask her ladyship." The two men in blue lowered their heads and remained unmoved. The young man with the surname Fong's expression changed. He looked at Li Yi with an even more vicious gaze. However, he did not say anything else. Instead, he walked straight to a door in front of him. After knocking on the door, he pushed it open and walked in. The young man angrily looked at the middle-aged Taoist nun who was sitting cross-legged on the bed and asked, "Auntie, I want an explanation. Why is he the left guardian? Who is he?" Chapter 655. Li Yi stared in astonishment at the man in blue who was kneeling on the ground with a pious expression. The man in blue could be considered as a small executive within the Holy Church, but he actually behaved like a fanatic. He didn't even let the higher-ups off. This brainwashing job was very successful. I understand." Not long after, the young man slowly retreated from the room. He stood at the door and spoke respectfully. When he turned around, he threw the sign back to Li Yi. He glared fiercely at him again, then flicked his sleeves and left. Li Yi held the sign in his hand and looked at it as he walked downstairs. That fellow just now seemed to have taken out a similar sign. On the way here, he had heard from the man in blue that besides the Empress, the Holy Church also had the left and right protectors, 8 purple-robed envoys, and more blue-robed envoys. There were even more yellow-robed envoys, and then there were 100,000 followers. However, all the believers had only seen the right emissary. As for the mysterious left emissary, whose position was second only to the Empress, he had never seen him before. Based on the situation just now, his sign seemed to be worth a bit more than the sign of the young man surnamed Fong, Azure Dragon Envoy. Li Yi thought for a moment. The Azure Dragon on the left and the White Tiger on the right. If he was the Azure Dragon Envoy, then wouldn't the man surnamed Fong be the White? Oh, so shameful. That man surnamed Fong was really shameless. We pay our respects to the left protector. Seeing the sign in Li Yi's hand, the dozen or so people around him all knelt down on the ground. The diners downstairs looked at this scene in astonishment. Their chopsticks fell to the ground. At the door, the young man surnamed Fong stopped in his tracks. He clenched his teeth and punched the wall. Then, he strode out of the inn. In the hall, a steward said to a servant loudly, "Be careful on the road. Remember to buy live fish, fresh ones." The handsome servant nodded slightly. He raised his head and glanced at the steward, then slowly walked out of the inn. Big Brother Lu's words are too biased. Who said that women enjoy leisure? Men fight at the borders while women weave at home. Afternoon, a loud and clear voice came from a wide plaza next to the Rue Family Inn. The Rue family inn and this brothel had both been moved here a few months ago. The so-called brothel was nothing more than a place to sing operas and listen to books. The stories were old-fashioned, and the plots were boring. Usually, when people were free, they rarely went to the brothel to watch operas and listen to music. However, this brothel subverted their understanding of brothels. There were novel stories, interesting scripts, and exquisite performances. Most importantly, the price was low. You could watch it for an hour with just 1 copper coin. Every few days, they would set up a stage outside to perform for the passers-by to watch for free. Therefore, although the brothel had only been here for a short period of time, it had accumulated enough popularity. At this moment, the woman on the stage was singing a new play, Hua Mulan. It was a story about a heroine who joined the army on behalf of her father. It was said that the current Princess Royal was also a heroine who was not inferior to any man. She fought bravely against the people of the Qi kingdom and helped the Jing kingdom regain its dignity. The people of Shu land had long heard of this story. Do you think that Hua Mulan, a woman, can lead an army to war? Who says she can't? Can't women fight? Doesn't your wife beat you up all day? What I mean is, as a woman, won't she be discovered in a place where men eat and sleep? Idiot, if you want to sleep with her every night, what would you say? The passers-by chatted as they watched the show. From time to time, people from the inn would come out and join the crowd. As for those who were self-conscious and did not want to be crowded with ordinary people, they could watch the show through a stage on the 2nd floor of the Rue family inn for just 1 silver coin. The view was clearer and the view was better. If they added another silver coin, they could enjoy the super VIP seats in the front row. They would also be provided with free sunflower seeds, mineral water, and melon seeds at no extra cost. Every free performance at the brothel would last from noon to night. Yong County did not have a curfew, so everyone could watch the show. Gradually, a few people in yellow walked out of the inn. They stood outside the crowd and watched with interest. A man carried a pole and walked over from afar. He shouted, "Herbal tea! Herbal tea! 2 copper coins for your fill." Every time there was a benefit performance at the brothel, there would be hawkers who wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to sell tea and fruits. Their business was much better than usual. It was already early April. From April onwards, summer would begin in Shu Prefecture. Immediately, someone walked out from the crowd and said, "Give me a cup of tea." "All right." The man laughed and immediately scooped up a cup of tea for the man. The man picked it up and drank it in 1 gulp. He smiled and said, "Delicious. Give me another cup. I've never had such a taste before, hee, a family recipe." The man laughed and scooped up another cup. At the edge of the crowd, a few people in yellow turned back and looked. They licked their lips and looked at the stage again. The youth with the surname Fong walked in front with a gloomy expression. 2 people in blue and several people in yellow followed behind him. A man in blue stepped forward and said, "Guardian, everyone is ready. We are only waiting for your order. There's no need to wait for me. Once it's midnight, we will act immediately." The youth with the surname Fong said and suddenly stopped. He tilted his head and glanced at them before continuing to walk forward. The people behind him parted ways. The youth with the surname Fong changed his direction and walked towards a deserted alley. Yong County was desolate and not very prosperous. The further the youth with the surname Fong walked, the more remote it became. After about 15 minutes, he reached a dead end. The youth with the surname Fong walked into the alley. Then, he turned around and crossed his arms. He said coldly, "Aren't you tired after following me for so long?" As his voice fell, a figure slowly walked out from behind. The moment he saw the figure, the youth with the surname Fong was startled. He blurted out, "It's you." Then, a cold smile appeared on his face. He said, I knew there was something wrong with you. I just didn't expect that you would have such guts. You actually dared to follow me alone. The youth with the surname Fong looked at the servant and clapped his hands. A few figures surrounded him from behind. They were the people in blue and yellow. The youth with the surname Fong looked at him and said coldly, You are in cahoots with that impostor, right? The handsome manservant didn't answer. His expression was still calm as he slowly walked over. This undisguised disregard caused the expression of the youth with the surname Fong to completely darken. Take him down. He waved his hand and said coldly, Take him alive. I want to see what that impostor is plotting. The people in blue and yellow sped up and walked towards the handsome servant. 3 breaths later, the youth with the surname Fong knelt on the ground. A long sword was pressed against his neck. His face was pale and he asked in a trembling voice, Who are you? What do you want? Chapter 656. At dusk, the weather turned from scorching hot to sultry. The operas in the inn's brothel also changed from Mulan, Peacock Flies Southeast, Mu Guiying, to Legend of the White Snake and Journey to the West. As the show went on, the number of onlookers around the stage increased instead of decreasing. There were no entertainment activities in the county, and everyone was idle. Who wouldn't like free excitement? It was just that after watching and chatting for a long time, they were very thirsty. Fortunately, there was a stall selling herbal tea to quench their thirst. More and more people walked over and spent 2 copper coins to drink a bowl before turning back to continue watching the show. Give me 10 people. A man in yellow walked over and threw a handful of copper coins on the table. Okay, please wait a moment. The man quickly put away the money, opened the 2 buckets, and said, I've been selling for a day. There's not much left anyway. You can drink as much as you want. After you finish, I can pack up and go back. More than 10 men in yellow and a few men in blue heard this and walked over. As Li Yi was about to walk out of the inn, a man in blue came forward and said awkwardly, Lord Protector, the Queen said you can't go out. Li Yi waved his hand and said, I'm just going out to watch the show. I've already prepared a place for you on the 2nd floor of the inn. Please move to where you can see better. There are too many people up there. It's boring. I'll go up and clear the place. Why don't I bring those performers to the Protector's room? Li Yi did not know whether he should be happy to have such a conscientious subordinate who was always thinking of his superior, or whether he should kick him to death. Li Yi waved his hand and said, Forget it. I'm not interested. The man in blue bowed and said, I'll send the Protector back to his room. At this time, a man in yellow suddenly walked in with a panicked expression. When he saw Li Yi, he immediately bowed and said, Greetings, Left Protector. Why are you so flustered? What's the matter? The man in blue asked unhappily. The yellow-clothed man panicked and said, Oh no, the right Protector has been captured. The blue-clothed man was startled for a moment before his expression immediately changed. Quickly go and report to Her Highness. Lady, someone shot this with an arrow. The yellow-clothed man handed a small pouch to the middle-aged Taoist nun. The middle-aged Taoist nun took the pouch and took out a jade pendant. Li Yi glanced at it and saw that it was the one that the youth surnamed Fong had taken out. Apart from the jade pendant, there was also a piece of paper. On it was written, If you want to save your protector, come to the small bamboo forest 30 li away in an hour. The yellow-robed man added, I have already asked. The bamboo forest is 30 miles east of the county town. A blue-clothed man stepped forward and respectfully said, Lady, the Protector's martial arts are unparalleled and there are several blue-clothed envoys by his side. It can be seen that the bandits are very powerful. Why don't you let this subordinate lead a group of people and go? All of you wait here, I will personally go. The middle-aged Taoist nun lightly said, "Prepare the horse." A moment later, the blue-clothed men in the inn looked at each other. The lady and the two purple-clothed envoys had gone to save the protector. They did not know who was so daring to kidnap the protector. However, from the looks of it, the strength of those people could not be underestimated. It was likely that only the lady would be able to deal with them. "Lord Protector, please return to your room to rest." Knowing that the protector of the left had a special identity, the lady told them to keep an eye on her. A blue-clothed man turned around and respectfully said, "Ah." Li Yi yawned and casually pointed at a manservant. He said, "It just so happens that I am also sleepy and want to eat something before I sleep. Little brother, remember to have the kitchen make something delicious and send it up." Along the way, they already knew that the protector of the left had two hobbies, eating and sleeping. Especially the latter, it had already reached an unimaginable level. A blue-clothed man pointed at the manservant and said, "Did you hear that? Immediately go to the kitchen and make a few, thump." Before he could finish his sentence, he felt a pain in his neck. His vision darkened and he fell to the ground. The other blue-clothed man was startled. He was about to move, but before he could make a sound, he fell to the ground. Not far away, someone had already noticed that something was wrong. As he ran over, he shouted, someone come quickly." However, his actions did not receive much response. Outside the door, the man selling herbal tea had already disappeared without a trace. A dozen or so figures were lying on the ground, causing the crowd to panic. "Let's go." Mississippi Lou casually pulled out autumn water from under the table and used its sheath to knock over a few people. She grabbed Li Yi's arm and rushed towards the door. Just as she was about to step out of the inn's door, she suddenly stopped. The middle-aged Taoist nun placed two fingers on her shoulder and said, "Alliance Master Lu, long time no see." She originally wanted to lure the tiger away from the mountain to escape, but she did not expect the Taoist nun to play hard to get. She should have already left the county town in a quarter of an hour, but she suddenly appeared at the door. A Grand Master actually used such a shameless sneak attack. Mississippi Lou's acupoints were sealed. She could only speak and could not move. All the previous arrangements were useless under the Taoist nun's absolute strength. "Take some people to the small bamboo forest and bring the protector back," the middle-aged Taoist nun ordered. Two men in purple obeyed and sent people to bring back the dozen or so people who were drugged. They then gathered about 20 people and quickly left the inn. With such an accident and the fact that it was already late, the charity performance outside the inn naturally could not continue. The Taoist nun sat at the table and looked at Mississippi Lou and asked, "Alliance Master Lu followed us all the way from the capital. It must have been difficult, right?" Mississippi Lou glanced at her with a calm expression and did not speak. A hunchbacked old man who was being held down by the man in blue said, "My lord, this really has nothing to do with us. If we don't do as she says, she will bring people to kill my entire family." The old man's face was full of fear. He said with a trembling voice, "This old man has an 80-year-old mother, a son who died young, and an 8-year-old grandson. My lord, please spare my life, please spare my life. My lord, he is the innkeeper of this inn." The man in blue brought the old man over and said. Mississippi Lou glanced at the old man and said, "He is right. This matter has nothing to do with him. If you want to kill me, do as you please. I don't want to involve innocent people. Listen, it really has nothing to do with me, it really has nothing to do with me." The old man seemed to finally realize that the Taoist nun in front of him was the one in charge. He hurriedly stepped forward and bowed, saying, "I was forced to do this. Spare me, spare me. Damn Taoist nun." When the sound of wind breaking could be heard, the expression on the Taoist nun's face changed drastically. It was too late for her to block it. She raised her palm and took a few steps back. She covered her shoulder and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. The hunchbacked old man had already straightened his body. His face twisted and he instantly changed his appearance. "Cough, it's you." The middle-aged Taoist nun coughed lightly and said word by word, "A dignified grandmaster actually resorted to such a shameless sneak attack. Aren't you afraid of being ridiculed by others if word gets out? You're speaking as if you didn't sneak attack me just now." The old man curled his lips and looked at her. He said with some anger, "Do you know how much suffering I've suffered because of you?" At this point, the old man's expression became even more furious. In the next moment, he rushed toward the Taoist nun. "I'm going to settle this score with you today." If she was at her peak, she would naturally not be afraid of this old man. However, she had been injured by the sneak attack just now and her strength had been damaged. She was no match for him. The Taoist nun's figure flashed and disappeared outside the door. "Where do you think you're going?" After dealing with the Taoist nun, these small fries were naturally easy to deal with. Thinking of the hardships he had suffered along the way, the old man's resentment toward her immediately increased. He immediately followed her out. "How do we unseal her acupoints?" Li Yi looked at Mississippi Lu and asked anxiously. Mississippi Lu shook her head. "She used a unique technique. You can't undo it." "Then what should we do?" Mississippi Lu glanced at him and closed her eyes. After a moment, an abnormal flush appeared on her face. She bit her lip and after her body trembled, she suddenly opened her eyes. She picked up Autumn Water with one hand and grabbed his arm with the other. She said in a low voice, While she's not here, leave quickly." Chapter 657. Hurry up and protect Her Highness. Seeing the old man chasing after the Taoist nun, a man in purple pointed and said anxiously, "You guys, stop the two of them." As soon as he finished speaking, several people fell to the ground at the inn's entrance. Although the handsome manservant's face was pale, he left afterimages of swords wherever he went. The ordinary blue-clothed and yellow-clothed messengers could not withstand his attacks at all. The purple-clothed man's expression was ugly. The holy religion had only left a few people here. Some of them had been taken away by the right emissary, while the rest were scattered around the inn. Among them, the ones in charge of guarding had been knocked out and the rest had gone to rescue Her Highness. There were not many people left. After a moment's hesitation, he quickly turned around and galloped in the direction where Her Highness had disappeared. Comparing the two of them to Her Highness, he immediately made a decision in his heart. "Leader, leave this to us. Hurry up and leave." In the darkness of the night, a man on a horse galloped over. He nimbly flipped over the horse and dismounted. Behind him, there were several figures following closely. "Thanks." Li Yi and second young mistress Lu quickly mounted their horses. They turned around and said to the man, "Be careful, heroes." He tightened his legs around the horse's belly and shook the reins. The two men and the horse quickly disappeared into the night. A few more yellow-clothed figures rushed out of the inn. "What are you going out for?" "Stay and have fun." The man grinned maliciously and went up to them. In an instant, the sound of weapons clashing rang out in the inn. One of the blue-clothed men had extraordinary skills, but the other side had more people. The yellow-clothed men could not help him much. The two groups were in a stalemate and fell into a stalemate. After a while, the man in front estimated that it was about time and shouted, "There's trouble. Brothers, retreat." As soon as he said this, the others no longer continued to fight. They quickly left the inn and ran into the depths of the night. Inside the inn, the blue-clothed man covered his wound with a gloomy expression. A yellow-clothed man came forward and asked anxiously, "Sir, what should we do now?" The blue-clothed man thought for a moment, then said in a deep voice, "Wait here for the Empress to return." Not long after, another person came forward to report. This subordinate found the shopkeeper tied up in the woodshed in the backyard. There were also a few workers there. After the battle just now, the blue-clothed and yellow-clothed men were all injured. They came to the woodshed and untied the ropes that bound the shopkeeper and his assistants. The man in blue asked in a deep voice, "Do you know the identity of the person who kidnapped you?" The manager of the restaurant was an old man. At this moment, his face was pale. His lips trembled as he said, I don't know." The man in blue turned around with a gloomy face. Just as he was about to speak, he lowered his head and saw a dagger protruding from his chest. He turned his head back with difficulty. "Shio! Shio! Shio!" Several ear-piercing sounds rang out, and the yellow-clothed men behind the blue-clothed man were all shot in between their eyebrows. They fell to the ground in response, and the waiters of the inn put away their crossbows. The old man pulled out the dagger and said in a low voice, "Hurry up and clean up." Not long after, a raging fire was ignited in the inn. People came out of the surrounding shops and houses one after another. When they saw the innkeeper wailing outside, they could not help but widen their eyes. "There's a fire." The street at night suddenly became noisy. At this time, the city gate was not closed. Li shook the reins, and the horse under him sped up. Everything would be easy once they got out of the city. Mississippi Lu did not tell him about the Grandmaster Elder. In fact, when he kidnapped the man surnamed Fong, he did not intend to lure the Taoist nun away at all. From the beginning to the end, the old man was the ultimate trump card. Only by seriously injuring or killing the Taoist nun would they have no worries. Otherwise, even if they could escape, they would not be able to go far. After all, this was the King of Shu's territory, and the Taoist nun was a grandmaster expert with countless masters around her. Under such circumstances, it was almost impossible to rely on the two of them to return to the capital city safely. And if the Taoist nun really fell for such a shallow trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain, the next thing she would have to do would be to run for thousands of miles with even more difficulty. "Just now, you, don't speak." Before Li Yi could open his mouth, he was interrupted by Mississippi Lu. If she did not want to speak, then so be it. Although he felt a little strange about Mississippi Lu at this moment, it was more important to escape. Everything could wait until they got out of here. What? The protector was kidnapped. Did something happen to Her Highness? What about the robbery of the King of Shu's treasury at midnight tonight? The protector, forget it for now. Follow me to rescue Her Highness. Dozens of black-clothed figures quickly rushed out of a low-rise house. They caught a glimpse of a horse galloping on the street in front of them. At once, a man in blue was startled, and then he shouted, "Stop them!" Hoot! The horse's hooves knocked on the bluestone-paved street, making a crisp sound. Looking at the man in blue and the dozens of figures behind him, Li Yi's face darkened. Mississippi Lu jumped off the horse and brandished her sword. Go! Dozens of black-clothed men swarmed over. Li Yi dismounted from the horse and caught a weapon that Mississippi Lu threw at him. He took a deep breath and leaned in her direction. "It's a rebellion, a rebellion." Jiang Zian hurriedly walked on the street, followed by a crowd of black figures. Just now, someone reported to the police late at night that more than 10 people fought in the Ru family inn. It was said that many people died. This was a serious case. He immediately summoned all the bailiffs and bailiffs in the county government, as well as the people nearby. Nearly 100 people rushed to the scene of the crime. It was impossible for him not to be anxious. If there were large-scale civilian casualties tonight, his position as the county lieutenant would be over. Although he wasn't very satisfied with this position, it was better than nothing. Resigning and being dismissed had completely different meanings. "Sir, look ahead." Suddenly, the bailiffs at the front stopped, pointed to the front, and said loudly. Jiang Zian raised his head and saw on the street in front of him, dozens of black-clothed men surrounded two figures, and the sound of weapons colliding came from the front. Lawless, really lawless. In broad daylight, in broad daylight, in broad daylight, in front of the dignified county lieutenant, they committed such violence. Jiang Zian's face showed fury. He waved his hand and said, "What are you waiting for? Save them." He retreated to the back of the bailiffs and then ran forward quickly with them. Li Yi's chest rose and fell slightly. He leaned back to back with Mississippi Liu. Around them were dozens of black-clothed men. Many people could only fall to the ground and moan, but there were still many people around them. Mississippi Liu coughed softly. Li Yi looked back and happened to see her wipe the blood from the corner of her mouth. "Are you hurt?" His face changed and he asked hurriedly. Mississippi Liu backhanded a person who was close to her and cut him down. She said coldly, "Don't be distracted in a fight of life and death. Have you forgotten what I taught you before?" Li Yi was stunned. He gritted his teeth and held the sword in his hand tightly again. "Catch them alive," the man in blue said coldly, but his face suddenly changed. He turned his head and looked behind him. A flurry of footsteps approached from afar. Nearly 100 bailiffs ran over and surrounded them. Dozens of black-clothed men immediately gathered in a circle and pointed their weapons at them. Mississippi Liu's body swayed, and Li Yi hurriedly held her. "People inside, listen up. You have been surrounded. I'll give you 3 breaths to think about it. Put down your weapons and surrender immediately. Otherwise, I won't be polite." Jiang Zian stood behind a tall and strong bailiff and shouted. Li Yi looked in a certain direction and asked tentatively, "Brother Jiang? Is it Brother Li?" A head popped out from behind the tall and strong bailiff. Jiang Zian's face was full of surprise and joy. He looked at Li Yi and hurriedly said, "Brother Li, what are you doing there? Come out." Immediately, the bailiffs made way for them. Li Yi helped Mississippi Liu out. The man in blue's face changed, but he didn't do anything in the end. "What the hell is going on? Why are they chasing you?" Jiang Zian looked at him and asked in surprise. "It's a long story." Li Yi looked at him and said, "Thank you for saving us, Brother Jiang." "It's my pleasure." Jiang Zian waved his hand. "Black-clothed and masked. These people don't look like good people. As the county lieutenant, it's my duty to keep order." Li Yi looked at him and said, "It's urgent. I need to leave the city now." Before he finished speaking, Jiang Zian took out a token from his waist and handed it to him. He said, "The city gate is closed now. Brother Li, take this token and leave the city. They won't stop you." Li Yi looked at the men in black and said, "These people." Jiang Zian smiled and said, "Brother Li, you can leave. Leave these people to me." Li Yi helped Mississippi Liu get on the horse. He looked at him deeply and said, "Brother Jiang, I will repay your kindness in the future." He shook the reins and the horse galloped in the direction of the city gate. "You and I hit it off at first sight." "You're welcome." Jiang Zian watched him go away. He looked back at the bailiffs, pointed at the men in black and said coldly, "Take them all down." Chapter 658. You, don't come near me. I'm the county lieutenant of this county, an official of the imperial court. If you dare to do anything to me, the imperial court will not let you go even if you run to the ends of the earth. Jiang Zian's face was pale. Looking at the man in blue walking toward him, he kept retreating. At this moment, nearly 100 government servants and strong men he brought with him were all lying on the ground. Of course, there were not many men in black left. Only a few of them could stand steadily at this moment. Damn it! The man in blue glared at him fiercely, looked back in a certain direction, and said coldly, "Go after them." A few standing men in black followed behind him and rushed forward. The remaining men in black helped each other to stand up. Those who were lightly injured carried those who were seriously injured, and soon disappeared on the street. "Are you all right?" Jiang Zian hurriedly ran over and asked. After a while, he breathed a sigh of relief. Although these men were a little embarrassed, fortunately, they did not kill them. The most serious injuries were only some superficial wounds. He looked up in the direction of the city gate and murmured, "Brotherly should have left the city by now, right?" At the same time, the man in blue looked at the closed city gate and the 2 rows of soldiers at the gate. His face was gloomy, and he said unwillingly, "Retreat." On a path in the forest outside Yong County, Li Yi rode on a horse. He turned around and looked at Mississippi Lu worriedly, asking, "How do you feel now?" "I'm fine." Mississippi Lu bit her lip, shook her head, and fell from the horse. Li Yi's face changed. He hurriedly flew down and caught her. Under the moonlight, her face could not be seen clearly. Li Yi reached out to touch her forehead, and his face changed again. "It's so hot." He turned his head and looked around. Apart from the sounds of unknown insects, the forest was quiet. He had just escaped from Yong County. It was a barren mountain and there was not even a place to stay. There was not even a shadow of a person. Where could he find a doctor? "I'm really lucky today. That caravan looks a little small, but it's a fat sheep. I didn't expect that there would be people passing by in the middle of the night in the wilderness. I told you, Yong County is my lucky place." A black shadow jumped down from the tree. His shiny head was particularly eye-catching under the dim light of the night. He pointed at the scholar in front of him and said loudly, "This road is opened by me, and this tree is planted by me. If you want to pass through, you must pay for the road. Scholar, hurry up and hand over all your valuables. Oh, you even have a horse. Not bad, not bad." Li gently put Mississippi Lu down. 3 breaths later, he held the bald bandit by the neck and asked coldly, "Where can I find a doctor?" "Spare my life, great hero." The bald bandit's face was pale as he spoke in a trembling voice. "Open your mouth." Li Yi exerted some force in his palm, and the bandit immediately opened his mouth. In the next moment, the bald bandit felt something enter his mouth. His expression changed as he asked, "Great hero, what is this?" Li Yi let go of his hand and said coldly, "Half-step epilepsy," with a smile. "After 24 hours, if there is no antidote, you will laugh non-stop until your whole body festers, your meridians break, and your body explodes to death." Explode to death, thump. The bald bandit's legs weakened, and he knelt on the ground. Li Yi kicked him and said, "Now, lead the way." In the dark of the night, an old man covered his chest and jumped down from the city wall that was dozens of feet high. In the end, he didn't manage to kill Taoist Nun. Although his sneak attack at the beginning was successful, it didn't achieve the result he had expected. Taoist Nun's strength was slightly higher than his, and there was also the group of troublesome little ghosts that gathered more and more. In the end, he could only seriously injure her. When he realized that he couldn't take her life today, he took the initiative to give up. Seriously injuring Taoist Nun should be considered as completing the mission, right? The old man took out a cloth bag from his pocket and threw a piece of candy into his mouth. He felt that he had forgotten something. He carefully filtered through the events in his mind. According to the second miss, if Taoist Nun really fell for the trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain, he should immediately leave the city and escape as fast as he could, rushing to the capital day and night. Even if Taoist Nun chased after him, it was still not enough for him to deal with Taoist nun alone. But with the second miss, he would always be in an invincible position. If that damned Taoist nun didn't fall for the trick, he would carry out the second plan. He would first seriously injure her, and the small fries would be easily taken care of. Then, he would escort them out of the city. Suddenly, the old man stopped in his tracks and froze on the spot. Damn it! He slapped his forehead and couldn't help but curse. Just now, he was only thinking about killing Taoist nun to vent his anger, and actually forgot the most important goal. If he couldn't bring them back safely, he wouldn't be able to complete his mission. The old man gritted his teeth and cursed bitterly, that damned Taoist nun. The county magistrate of Yong County stood in front of the still-burning Rue family inn, his face extremely gloomy. At this time, the innkeeper was describing with tears and snot how those villains fought in the inn, and how they burned down the inn. He was a pitiful old man, and his little property was burned down in one night. How was he going to live in the future? The county magistrate asked in a deep voice, "Do you know who did it?" "I only remember that the leader was a Taoist nun, and her subordinates in yellow and blue." The old man's confession was quickly confirmed by the surrounding neighbors. After all, those people in strange clothes had been in front of them for a day, and it was hard not to notice them. "It's them." Jiang Xian came from the side and said loudly, "Lord Wu, when I came from the county government just now, I saw dozens of people daring to kill people on the street, and the leader was a man in blue. Fortunately, I arrived in time to avoid a tragedy." The county magistrate nodded and said, "The imperial court has sent an official document saying that Li Yi, the county earl of Chang'an, was kidnapped by a nun from the capital city, and may have arrived in Suzhou. So it should be Taoist nun." Jiang Xian was stunned and asked, "Li Yi was kidnapped? When did this happen?" "About a month ago." The county magistrate said, "The imperial court asked us to rescue them immediately once we find their traces. His Highness, the King of Shu, has just ordered us to report to him immediately if there is any news." Jiang Xian seemed to have not recovered from the news. After a while, a strange expression appeared on his face, and he murmured, Li Yi, I didn't expect that you would have such a day." After a while, he seemed to think of something, and his face changed. He asked the shopkeeper, "What does the Taoist nun look like? Who else is with her?" "About 40 years old, and there is a young man who always wears a white robe beside her." The shopkeeper immediately told the truth. Jiang Xian immediately asked, "Is his surname Fang?" Yes. The young man surnamed Li called him her brother Fang, the shopkeeper said immediately. Jiang Xian continued to ask, "Is the young man surnamed Li Xian?" The old man shook his head and said, "I don't know about this." Jiang Xian's breathing became a little rapid, and he asked, "Think about it again. Who were they with when they came?" A shop assistant came up and said, "I remember that the young man surnamed Fang has been here for a long time. Yesterday, in addition to the Taoist nun and those strange people, there was another young man, but what?" Jiang Xian asked impatiently. "But the young man's appearance." The shop assistant thought for a while, shook his head and said, "Maybe the first day was at night, and I saw wrongly. I always felt that the young man looked a little different on the second day." Jiang Xian stood there in a daze, and his face was blank and lifeless. The county magistrate of Yong County looked at him and asked in confusion, "Lord Jiang, what's wrong?" "Nothing." Jiang Xian shook his head and said, "Lord Wu, I just fought with the bandits and consumed too much energy. Now I want to be alone, so I'll leave this place to you." After saying that, Jiang Xian turned around and left, his back lonely and bleak. The county magistrate of Yong County watched him leave, his face full of shock. The cold moonlight shone on Suzhou, on Yong County, and on a dried-up well in a courtyard that had been abandoned for a long time. "Is there anyone?" The man surnamed Fang was lying at the bottom of the well with a swollen face. He looked up at the mouth of the well and said weakly. Beside him, a few people in blue and yellow, who had either broken arms or legs, looked up at the sky and spoke in a hoarse voice. Is there anyone? Save us, goddess, save us. Chapter 659. Yong County was the border of the Jing Kingdom, facing the Qi Kingdom across the river. There were many mountains around it, and most of the villages were built on the mountains. The location was remote, and the people were poor. There were many bandits in the mountains. Not only did the bandits often go down the mountains to harm the villagers, but they also targeted the merchants who traveled between the Jing and Qi Kingdom. The Black Wind Stronghold used to be a stronghold for a small group of bandits. The name of the stronghold was Domineering, but it was actually just a few small houses in the mountains. The number of bandits was less than 20. A few months ago, they were blind enough to target a small caravan. They didn't expect the caravan to hire powerful guards. The 20 bandits were all killed, and their heads were hung on a tree. From then on, the Black Wind Stronghold only had a few small houses. After being abandoned for a few months, the stronghold had a new owner at noon today. At this time, in a clean room, the bald bandit said with a trembling voice, "Hero, we don't have a doctor here." Li Yi touched Mississippi Lu's forehead and looked at him. "Do you have wine?" "I just moved here today, I don't have any," the bald bandit said. Seeing that the hero's face darkened, he immediately nodded his head like a chick pecking rice. "Yes, there should be. I robbed a small caravan today, they definitely have some wine. I'll go get it immediately." After leaving the room and closing the door gently, the bald bandit let out a long sigh of relief. This young man looked like a gentleman, but when he fought, how could he be so terrifying? A bandit came up and said in a low voice, "Boss, he's only one person, and he's a burden. Why don't we charge in and kill him with one strike each?" The bald bandit smacked his head and scolded, "Shut up. Where are the people from the afternoon locked up? Take me there quickly." It was easy to rush in, and it was also easy for each of them to chop down. However, it was hard to say if they could defeat the young man together. Moreover, if they really killed him, who would cure the poison of the half-step upside down with a smile? If they didn't have the antidote after 24 hours, he would laugh non-stop, his whole body festering, his meridians broken, and his body exploding, in the innermost room. The bandit knew that his boss was in a bad mood and didn't dare to provoke him again. He immediately said, "Boss, I'll take you there." "Boo-hoo. Miss, are we going to die?" In a dilapidated room, there was a soft sobbing sound. After a moment of silence, a young woman's voice rang out, "It's all my fault. If I hadn't been so stubborn, I wouldn't have been caught by these bandits." In the corner, a big man's face turned red as he said, "Miss, please don't say that. It's all my fault, I didn't protect you all. That surnamed by was plotting against Miss, it was right for Miss not to be with him. If I had been more vigilant, I wouldn't have." The female voice paused for a moment, then said, "It doesn't matter. At that time, you won't be able to do anything." Another young man said regretfully, "If they hadn't captured Miss, we wouldn't have been afraid of them." An old voice sighed and said, "Be quiet, don't let them hear us. Right now, we should be thinking about how to escape." Bang! Just as the old man finished speaking, the door was suddenly pushed open and a bald man walked in from outside. After seeing the bald man in the light of the lamp, the sobbing servant girl immediately stopped crying and shrank back, her eyes filled with fear. Seeing these people enter, the beautiful woman's expression also changed slightly. The veins on the big man's forehead bulged and he said loudly, "If you have any problems, come at me, don't hurt my miss." The bald bandit glanced at him and asked, "Do you have wine?" The big man was stunned. Thinking that not only did this bald man want to sully the mist, but he also wanted wine to liven things up, he immediately widened his eyes and said angrily, "If you want to kill me, do as you please. Don't you dare sully my miss. Are you *king crazy?" The bald bandit kicked the big man and said angrily, "I asked you if you have wine, what does that have to do with your miss?" The big man was stunned. "Didn't you want my miss to suppress the stronghold?" The bald bandit kicked him again and said, "Are you trying to kill me? Less nonsense, tell me, do you have wine?" This time, he ran away from home because he couldn't stand being looked down upon at home. He swore that he wouldn't go back until he made a name for himself. When the time came, that tigress would look at him in a different light. Before he made a name for himself, he already had a wife to suppress the stronghold. Wouldn't he be beaten to death by that tigress? "The wine is in the second carriage," the beautiful woman said. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" The bald bandit glanced at her and walked out the door. When he reached the door, he said again, "Don't think I didn't hear you just now. Don't think about running away. Send a letter home and pay 1,000, at least 800 taels of ransom, and I will let you go. Don't worry, before that, I won't touch a single hair of yours." Hearing the door slam, the woman raised her head, a complicated expression on her face. 800 taels, did he know how much the goods in those 2 carriages were worth? Just that piece of glazed ware alone was more than 10 times that price. All the goods added together, it would be at least 100 times that number. The big man twisted his body and said softly, "Miss, don't worry, we will be able to leave very soon." He moved his wrist, a hint of sharpness faintly appearing in his palm. "Hero, the wine is here." The bald bandit fawningly placed a jar of wine and 2 empty bowls on the table. Li lowered his head to look at the porcelain bowls. The bald bandit immediately said, "I just bought it, it's clean. Get out. Hero, the antidote, open your mouth." The bald bandit was overjoyed and immediately opened his mouth. Li raised his hand and something flew into his mouth. "Did you swallow it?" Li looked at him and asked. "Yes, I swallowed it, thank you, hero." The bald bandit's face was full of joy. When he turned around, a sneer appeared on his face. He walked to the door and turned back to ask, "Hero, was that the antidote just now?" "No." The bald bandit's expression was startled. Li said lightly, "You ate 2 half-step with a smile, now you only have 12 hours left. Still not leaving?" Li looked back at him and asked, "Do you want another one?" As soon as he finished speaking, the bald bandit disappeared from the house and closed the door. Li put the jar of wine and the empty bowls on the bed, and then put down the curtain beside the bed. He took an empty bowl and filled it with half a bowl of wine. After smelling it, he tore off a piece of his sleeve and dipped it in the wine. He lifted Mississippi Lou's hand and carefully wiped her palm. She was having a fever now, and there was no antipyretic, so she could only use the primitive method of physical cooling. After wiping her palms, he rolled up her sleeves and wiped her arms, then her forehead, and her neck. The evaporation of alcohol would take away a lot of heat. Her current situation was more serious than Ruoqing's at that time. Li took off her shoes and socks, and wiped her feet and calves. If he wanted the effect to be good, he had to wipe her chest and armpits. However, the person in front of him was Mississippi Lou, not Rui, so he still had to pay attention to some boundaries. Li sat by the bed and reached out to touch her forehead. It was still a little hot. The servant's clothes were very tight, and the buttons were buttoned all the way to the neck, which was not good for heat dissipation. Li frowned and unbuttoned her neck and chest. When he unbuttoned the last button, he suddenly seemed to feel something. He raised his head and met Mississippi Lou's clear eyes. The atmosphere was momentarily heavy. "You have a fever." Li looked at her, waved the strip of cloth in his hand, and said, "Wipe it with alcohol, it can reduce the fever." Mississippi Lou raised her wrist and saw that her sleeves were almost down to her shoulders. She also felt a little cold on her calves and feet. She looked at Li Yi again. Li Yi dipped the strip of cloth in the wine and gently wiped it on her forehead again. He said, "The situation is special now, so let's not bother about these things. Besides, there is an old saying that the sister-in-laws, of what?" She looked at Li Yi with bright eyes and asked. Two of the bandits were knocked to the ground in a single exchange, and the few people behind him were also engaged in battle with the bandits who were charging over. The young servant girl and the beautiful woman ran out of the room and ran outside under the escort of the two men. Although the burly man's side had fewer people, they were slightly stronger. Just the burly man alone was enough to take on 3 bandits at once. The few of them were actually able to stall all the bandits, making it impossible for them to chase after the woman. Everything happened too suddenly. Both sides didn't have any weapons. At this moment, it was all close combat, and the fight was quite intense. At this moment, a young man walked out of a room while supporting another person. The large man turned his head to look and was slightly startled. He immediately said loudly, "Scholar, what are you waiting for? We'll stop these bandits. You should hurry up and escape." The scholar seemed to be frightened by the situation in front of him. He stared blankly at the scene in front of him and didn't move at all. "Dalong, you go take them away." Seeing the scholar's appearance, a trace of helplessness appeared on the burly man's face. Immediately, a young man knocked down a bandit and quickly ran over. "Hurry up and leave." The young man seemed to have finally returned to his senses. He carried his companion horizontally and quickly followed the young man away. "He's quite strong, but too timid." Seeing this, the burly man said in a low voice and focused even more on dealing with the bald bandit in front of him. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the bald bandit had suddenly become desperate. Seeing that the young man had left, the bald bandit roared angrily. He was both shocked and afraid. He really wanted to rush over and ask for the antidote back, but the burly man blocked him. His eyes suddenly widened, and with an angry roar, he pounced over again. The burly man's expression changed. At this moment, the bald bandit gave him a great deal of pressure. A quarter of an hour later, the burly man panted heavily, his whole body drenched in sweat. He looked at the bald bandit and said, "Isn't it just 1,000 taels of silver? We'll give it to you, all right. Get lost." The bald bandit spoke in a hoarse voice, then charged forward once more. Silver was important, but his life was even more important. Without the antidote, he would explode and die in 10 hours. "Do you really think I'm afraid of you?" the burly man said angrily. He gathered his remaining strength and punched out. It was already past midnight. Under the moonlight, 2 carriages sped along the mountain road. The young girl placed her hand on her chest and timidly asked, "Miss, do you think they'll be able to catch up?" The beautiful woman gritted her teeth and didn't speak. She glanced behind her and said, "Wait for them up ahead after we leave the forest." Chapter 661. What? You're saying that Taoist nun is the one who took Li Yi away from the capital? The king of Shu stood up abruptly from his chair and asked, "Where is he now?" "I haven't seen Uncle Li. He should be hidden by them." Jiang Xian said guiltily, "I'm incompetent and failed to save Uncle Li from those people." "Where's Taoist nun?" the king of Shu asked again. "He disappeared last night," Jiang Xian said with his head down. "Find him." The king of Shu slammed the table and said, "Find him for me." A moment later, Jiang Xian walked out of the mansion of the king of Shu and let out a long sigh of relief. Although almost a night had passed, the feeling in his heart was still a little complicated. He waved his hand and said to a constable beside him, "Pass down my order. All government runners and civilians are to search every village. Report to me immediately if you find any news of those people." At this time, in a village not far from Yonge County, dozens of figures were waiting respectfully outside a courtyard. In the courtyard, the man in purple bowed and said, "Lady, I've sent people to check the small bamboo forest mentioned by that man, but they didn't find the protector." The middle-aged Taoist nun leaned against the headboard, her hair slightly messy and her face pale. She waved her hand and said, "Continue to search in the city. In addition, send more people to look for those two people." "Yes." The man in purple answered and walked out of the door. Not long after, the dozens of people in blue and yellow outside changed their clothes and dispersed. In a dry well in Yonge County, the man surnamed Fong was pale. His acupoints had been sealed, so he couldn't run his genuine qi. He looked up at the sky at the mouth of the well with despair on his face. Outside Yonge County, deep in a mountain forest, the bald man leaned against a tree with a dull expression. His eyes were lifeless, and he also looked up at the sky. "How much time do I have?" After an unknown period of time, his lips moved with difficulty. A bandit beside him looked at the sky and sighed, saying, "Less than an hour." The bald man put his hands behind his head and said, "After today, you can go back. Big brother." The bald man waved his hand and said, "Go back and farm well. Although the days are a little hard, you won't starve to death. It's better than hanging your head on a belt." Half-step mental disorder with a smile. "If I can't help but laugh later, give me a quick death. Then, dig a hole and bury me. Don't pile up dirt, don't erect a monument, don't do anything." A bitter smile appeared on the bald man's face. "Bleeding from all 7 apertures and exploding to death. It's too unsightly." A bandit gritted his teeth and stood up, saying, "Big brother, I'll go get the antidote." "It's too late." The bald bandit waved his hand and said, "Go back and help me pass a message to your sister-in-law. Tell her that I don't regret marrying her in this life. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have advised Big Brother." One of the bandits gritted his teeth, stood up, and slashed the tree with his sword. "The one in front, do you see a young man with a girl?" A voice came from behind. The bandit impatiently waved his hand and said, "Scram, scram, scram. I'm annoyed. What are you yelling for? I'll kill you if you yell again." Thump. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly felt a pain in the crook of his leg. His legs gave way and he knelt on the ground. "What did you just say?" An old man with messy hair walked up from behind and looked at him. The eyes of the bandit suddenly widened and they couldn't help but shiver. Senior. The fear in their hearts increased to the extreme. Thinking of the terrifying scene from a few days ago, a few of them immediately knelt on the ground. "It's you guys again." The old man's face also revealed a surprised expression. He remembered that the bald man was the leader of the group. He walked over and asked, "Hey, have you seen a young man with a beautiful girl with a young man?" The bald man leaned against the tree with an emotionless expression. He glanced at the old man and didn't answer. The old man narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "I'm asking you a question." The bald man glanced at him again. His eyes were indifferent and didn't contain any emotion. The old man grabbed him by the neck and lifted him up against the tree trunk. He said, "Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you?" The bald man looked at him coldly and said, "Don't talk nonsense. If you want to kill me, then kill me. Don't be so wishy-washy like a woman." The cold expression on the old man's face disappeared and he looked at him in surprise. "You want to die?" The bald man said indifferently, "In any case, the poison will take effect in an hour. Just kill me and give me a quick death." The old man grabbed his wrist and felt it. He said in surprise, "You're not poisoned," the big man said coldly, "Oomph. That laughing half-step madness is a rare poison in the world. If there's no antidote, I'll laugh non-stop in an hour. My whole body will fester, my meridians will break, and I'll explode and die. The old man was even more surprised. He said, I've roamed the martial world for decades, but I've never heard of such a strange poison. That's because you're ignorant. The bald man looked at him and said, if you want to kill me, then kill me. Stop talking nonsense. If you don't kill me, I'll find someone else to kill me. The old man didn't get angry. Instead, he laughed and said, I'm called Monster Sue in the martial world. I didn't expect you to be even weirder than me. You're actually begging someone to kill you, big brother, big brother. At this time, a figure ran out from a house not far away. He waved the paper in his hand and said happily, Big brother, I found this in the room. That person said that it wasn't poison. It was all a lie. Really? The big man was shocked. He took the paper from his hand. After looking at it, he gave it to another person beside him and said, Virgu, you've also studied for 2 years. Look at what's written here. That person hurriedly looked at the paper and slapped his thigh. He said, Big brother, it's true. That person left a letter saying that it wasn't poison. The big man's face revealed an ecstatic expression. He murmured, So, I don't have to die. No, no, no. The old man indifferently glanced at him and shook his head. I've thought about it seriously just now. Since you want to die, why don't I fulfill your wish? In the future, it will be a story that I'm happy to help others. The smile on the bald man's face froze. Plop. He knelt on the ground and hugged the old man's thigh. With tears and snot, he said, Senior, I was wrong. I don't want to die. Don't you want to find someone? Let's talk about finding someone. You really don't want to reconsider. The old man looked at him and said, When others asked me to help, the reward was 100,000 taels of silver. I'm in a good mood today, so I won't take a penny. You've made a big profit. No, I won't. The bald man shook his head and said, Senior, you shouldn't help with less than 100,000 taels of silver. I can't let you suffer a loss. The old man took out a portrait from his chest and asked, Tell me, have you seen this person? No. The big man shook his head. Although the person in the portrait gave him a very familiar feeling, he had indeed never seen him before. The old man frowned and seemed to have thought of something. He said, Think about it again. That person is about this tall, and there should be a girl beside him. No, the young man dressed like an inn's manservant. He should be carrying a sword with him. The bald bandit was stunned for a moment before he nodded and said, I think I've seen him before. 10 hours ago, they went down this path. The bald bandit had a flattering expression on his face as he pointed to a mountain path. That's right. The sloppy old man nodded and took out an item from his chest. He threw it to the bandit. This is for you. The bald man watched as the old man threw a milky white square object into his mouth. He looked at the exact same object in his hand and also put it in his mouth. In the next moment, his eyes suddenly widened. This taste. Chapter 662. Have a safe journey, Senior. On the mountain path, a dozen or so bandits stood in a neat row, bowing as they watched the sloppy old man leave. Only when his figure had completely disappeared did a bandit turn around and look at the bald man, saying, Big brother, let's go back. We're not cut out to be bandits. The other bandits all agreed. Thinking back to the days they had spent as bandits, they hadn't even made a single deal and had almost lost their lives. Just thinking about it made them feel disheartened. The bald bandit patted him on the shoulder and said meaningfully, Ergo, don't be discouraged when you encounter problems. Don't be afraid of failure. Since ancient times, which one of those who achieved great things has never experienced setbacks and tribulations? The young bandit opened his mouth. Big brother, I've decided. The bald bandit stood at the front of the mountain path and looked at the distant mountains. He pointed in a certain direction and said, as a bandit, I won't be satisfied if I don't go there. He turned around to look at the crowd and said, if you want to go back, then go back. Go back and live well. That's fine. We pledge our lives to follow Big Brother. A bandit half knelt on the ground and said loudly, we pledge our lives to follow Big Brother. We pledge our lives to follow Big Brother. The dozen or so figures all knelt down, their voices resounding through the mountain path in unison. You're a scholar. Why aren't you studying at home? What are you doing here in the wilderness? Li Yi said with a laugh as he leaned against the carriage. The man rode beside him. Reading 10,000 books is not as good as traveling 10,000 miles. Li Yi smiled and said, it's always good to travel more. You're a scholar after all. You speak exactly the same as my young miss. The man scratched his head and said, but, it's the first time I've seen someone who can talk about eloping with a girl in such a reasonable way. Li Yi looked at the slowly moving caravan and did not reply this time. He had already learned the identity of these people through a few short conversations along the way. This was a caravan traveling between the Qi kingdom and the Jing kingdom. Although the Qi kingdom and the Jing kingdom were enemies, this did not affect the merchants much. They would take the goods of their own country to another country to sell, and then buy the scarce goods of their own country from the other country. Going back and forth, they could earn a lot of money. However, the distance between the two countries was long and there were countless dangers. Therefore, most of the caravans traveled in groups or attached themselves to some powerful large caravans. There were very few caravans that dared to travel alone with only a dozen people. A team led by a weak woman was even rarer. The carriage he was in was originally used to carry goods. Fortunately, there weren't many goods, so Mississippi Lu could rest inside. At this moment, the carriage was far away from Shuzhou. Mississippi Lu's current condition was not suitable for her to travel. When they arrived at the next state capital, she could contact the local brothel. After that, things would be much simpler. The man left for a while and came back with the horse. He asked, my miss asked me to come and ask you where you are going. When we arrive at the next place where we can rest, let us down. Sorry for the trouble. It's a small matter, a small matter. The man waved his hand and said, then I'll go and tell the Mississippi. Li Yi nodded. He lifted the curtain and looked inside. Mississippi Lu looked at him. You're awake. Mississippi Lu nodded. Then I'll sleep for a while. Call me if there's anything. He was already very tired after fighting with those men in black last night and rushing all the way here. He leaned against the carriage and lost consciousness the next moment. Mississippi Lu put autumn water aside. Just as Li Yi was about to slide down, she moved her body to the side. She looked down at Li Yi, who was still frowning in his sleep. After a long time, she looked away and let out a long breath. Li Yi was woken up by a bump. He rubbed his forehead that had bumped into the carriage. He turned his head to look and suddenly sat up. He blurted out, Rui. The man lifted the curtain and said, you're talking about that girl. The miss has invited her to the carriage in front. Li Yi rubbed his forehead again and asked, where are we now? You've only slept for less than an hour. The burly man said, look, that's the ferry in front. You should be from Jing country, right? When you reach the ferry, turn left and you'll reach Qin County, and turn right and you'll reach Yong County. It's closer to Qin County. Elder Lin said that this lady can't travel. I'll help you hire a carriage. Li Yi was stunned for a moment as he listened to the burly man's incessant chatter. Isn't this the carriage to the Jing kingdom? No. The man shook his head and said, "We've just returned from the Jing kingdom. After this ferry, we'll reach the Daki kingdom." Li Yi jumped down from the carriage and rubbed his head. He had actually taken the wrong carriage. He definitely couldn't go to Yong County. The king of Shu and the Taoist nun must be looking for them. Chen County. Chen County was just next to Yong County. With the friendship between him and the king of Shu, he would probably turn the entire Shu province upside down. Forget it, he should go to Chen County first. With the cover of the brothel there, it should be safer. There were many boats and carriages at the ferry. The guards were moving the goods from the carriages in front of them onto the boats. A few steps ahead, the woman was talking to Mississippi Liu. "Thank you for last night." Li Yi walked over and cupped his hands towards the beautiful woman. The woman nodded slightly and said, "It was just a coincidence." "You're welcome." Li Yi looked at Mississippi Liu and said, "We have to go." The woman turned around and said to the man and the others, "We should also get on the boat." "Hey, you guys, I'm talking to you guys." "Wait a minute, have you seen these two people?" A voice came from behind. Li Yi turned around and saw a group of soldiers stopping the passing carriages. The leader of the soldiers opened the curtains and carefully compared the few people with the portraits in his hand. Then, he waved his hand and said, "All right, you guys can go." Then, he turned around and pointed again, saying, "That carriage over there, stop." Ahem. Li Yi turned around and looked at the woman. He said, "Miss, I have a presumptuous request." The woman named Lin Wanru was startled. She looked at the young man in front of her and then looked at the woman in men's clothing. A look of understanding appeared on her face. After a while, she nodded slightly. "All right. The few of you, guard here. Check every car and every person that passes by carefully." A young general stood at the ferry and said to dozens of soldiers, "This is the order of His Highness, the King of Shu. If you find out, His Highness will greatly reward you." Li Yi stood at the bow of the boat and looked at the blurred ferry. The man's laughter came from the side. "Ha, I've said it before. If you want to go, go far away. It's not good to be caught doing this kind of thing. However, you guys are already like this. It doesn't matter where you are. Go to a place where no one knows you and live a good life. That's better than anything else." The man patted him on the shoulder and said, "You guys have no place to go for now. You can go to our place first. It's not far from here anyway. You're a scholar with a weak body, but you seem to be quite strong. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.